You're listening to Emberborn chapters 5 through 10, brought to you by Cheney Audiobooks. Please like and subscribe. They walked for the rest of the day, and Kale led them along paths that seemed to exist only for him. The forest here was different from the ancient woods where Aaron had first awakened, younger, denser, with a canopy that filtered the afternoon light into scattered fragments of gold and green. Sometimes they followed game trails worn smooth by the passage of deer and smaller creatures. Sometimes they pushed through undergrowth where no trail existed at all, forcing their way between thorny bushes and tangled vines that caught at Aaron's clothes and scratched his arms. Kale moved with absolute certainty, never hesitating, never second-guessing his direction. His footsteps made no sound on the forest floor, even when crossing patches of dry leaves that should have crunched beneath his weight. Aaron found himself watching the way his guide moved. There was something almost liquid about it, a grace that seemed too perfect, too effortless. Like watching water flow downhill or wind moving through grass. Natural, but somehow too natural. The animals seemed to notice it too. Birds fell silent as they approached, their songs cutting off mid-note. A deer that had been drinking from a stream lifted its head, saw Kale, and bolted without the usual moment of frozen assessment. Even the insects seemed to give them a wide berth, their buzzing fading as they passed. Aaron tried several times to start a conversation, to ask more questions about his past or about Kale himself. "You said the Emberborn built their fortress in the Ashlands," he ventured during a brief rest. "What was it like?" "The fortress, I mean." "Stone and fire," Kale replied, not looking at him. "We should keep moving." An hour later, as they climbed a steep slope, "How did you know my parents? Were you part of the guild?" "I knew them. That's all that matters." Kale's tone wasn't unkind, but it was final. Later still, as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, "What are you, Kale?" "Really?" This time, Kale did stop. He turned to look at Aaron, and for just a moment, the light caught his eyes at an odd angle. They seemed to reflect the fading sunlight like a cat's eyes, too bright, too intense. Then he blinked, and they were just eyes again, human, tired, sad. "I'm someone who keeps his promises," Kale said quietly. "That's all you need to know for now." It was clear he had no interest in revealing more. But Aaron could sense something beneath the evasions, not hostility, but a kind of careful distance, as if Kale was afraid of saying too much. Or perhaps afraid of what Aaron might think if he knew the truth. As evening approached, they reached a rocky outcropping that overlooked a valley. The land below was a patchwork of forest and meadow, with a silver thread of river winding through it. The sky was turning orange and purple, clouds catching the last light of day. It would have been beautiful if Aaron hadn't been so exhausted. His legs ached from the constant walking. His feet were blistered inside his boots. His shoulders burned from the weight of his pack, and his throat was dry despite the water he'd been drinking throughout the day. He wanted nothing more than to collapse and sleep for a week. Kale stopped and surveyed the landscape below, his eyes scanning for something Aaron couldn't see. His gaze was methodical, patient, taking in every detail of the terrain. Aaron noticed that Kale's breathing hadn't changed at all despite the day's exertion. He wasn't even slightly winded. "We'll camp here tonight," Kale said. "No fire. The smoke would give away our position." "But it's going to be cold," Aaron protested, already feeling the temperature beginning to drop as the sun sank lower. "Then you'll be cold." Kale's tone left no room for argument. "Your comfort is less important than your survival." They made camp in a shallow depression among the rocks, sheltered from the wind but exposed to the sky. Aaron ate some of the dried meat the loggers had given him, washing it down with water from his water skin. The meat was tough and salty, but he was too hungry to care. Kale ate nothing, simply sat cross-legged on a flat rock, staring out into the gathering darkness. His posture was perfectly still, almost statue-like. Aaron couldn't even see him breathing. "Don't you need to eat?" Aaron asked, tearing off another piece of jerky with his teeth. "Not as often as you do." "What does that mean?" Kale didn't answer. Aaron wrapped himself in his cloak and tried to get comfortable on the hard ground. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and without a fire, the cold seeped into his bones. He shivered, pulling the cloak tighter around himself. His breath misted in the air. Above, stars were beginning to appear, more than he'd ever seen before, thousands of them, scattered across the darkening sky like diamonds on velvet. "Tell me about the Emberborn," he said, partly to distract himself from the cold, partly because he desperately needed to understand. What were they like? What could they do? Kale was silent for so long that Aaron thought he wouldn't answer. The darkness deepened. The stars grew brighter. An owl called somewhere in the distance, its voice lonely and haunting. Then, quietly, Kale began to speak. They were the first of the fire mages. Not the first to use fire magic. That art is ancient, older than any guild, older than recorded history, but the first to truly master it. To understand it not as a tool or a weapon, but as a living force that could be shaped and guided with will and wisdom. Kale's voice took on a different quality as he spoke, as if he was remembering something from very long ago. Something precious and painful. They could call flame from nothing, from the air itself, summoning it with a thought. They could shape it with their will, make it burn hot enough to melt stone or gentle enough to warm without consuming. They could create fire that burned in colors no natural flame ever showed, white gold fire that could heal wounds, blue fire that could purify corruption, green fire that could make plants grow even in winter. Aaron listened, transfixed. He tried to imagine such power, such control. His own fire magic felt wild and dangerous by comparison, something that erupted from him rather than something he commanded. They built their guild in a place where fire naturally gathered, Kale continued. In the ashlands, far to the south, where the mountains breathe smoke and the ground is warm even in the depths of winter. The earth there is alive with heat, volcanic vents that release steam and sulfur, pools of water that boil without any flame beneath them, rivers of molten rock that flow like water through channels carved by ancient eruptions. It sounds dangerous, Aaron said. It was. But to the Emberborn, it was home. They understood the fire in the earth, knew how to work with it rather than against it. They carved their fortress from volcanic rock, black stone that could withstand any heat, that seemed to drink in flame and glow with inner light. The fortress had no need of torches or hearths. The walls themselves provided warmth and illumination, channels of molten rock flowing through grooves in the floors and walls, contained by magic and stone. Aaron could almost see it, a castle of black stone glowing with inner fire, beautiful and terrible at once. How many of them were there? At their height? Perhaps 300 mages, plus their families, their students, their servants. The Emberborn didn't just practice fire magic, they lived it, breathed it, made it part of everything they did. They forged weapons that never dulled, armor that could turn aside any blade. They created glass that could focus sunlight into beams of pure heat. They grew crops in volcanic soil that produced harvests 3 times a year. They sound incredible, Aaron whispered. They were. Kale's voice grew heavier. For generations, they were the most powerful fire mages in the world. Other guilds respected them, feared them, sought their alliance. The Emberborn were known for their wisdom as much as their power. They understood that fire could create as well as destroy, that true mastery meant knowing when to burn and when to warm. What happened to them? Aaron asked, though he already knew the answer would hurt. Kale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. Valor happened. The name hung in the air like a curse. He came with an army, Kale said. Not just his own forces, but mages from other guilds who he'd convinced or coerced into serving him. He promised them power, territory, wealth, whatever they wanted, he offered it. And some were foolish enough to believe him. Why did he attack them? Because they stood in his way. Because they represented something he couldn't control, a guild that answered to no one, that held power independent of his influence. Valor wants all magic under his dominion, all guilds either serving him or destroyed. The Emberborn refused to bow. So he eliminated them. Kale's hands clenched into fists, and for just a moment, Aaron saw something flicker across his skin, a shimmer like heat haze, like the air above a fire. Then it was gone, and Kale's hands were just hands again. The attack came at night, Kale continued, his voice tight with old anger. Coordinated, overwhelming. Valor's forces surrounded the fortress, cutting off all escape routes. They used water magic to cool the volcanic channels, earth magic to seal the vents, wind magic to blow away the smoke and heat. They turned the Emberborn's greatest strength, their connection to fire, against them. Eren felt sick. How long did they fight? Hours. The Emberborn were powerful, but they were outnumbered 5-1. They fought with everything they had: fire that could melt armor, flames that could burn through stone, heat that could boil blood in veins. But it wasn't enough. The fortress fell just before dawn. Most were killed in the fighting. The survivors. Kale's voice broke slightly. The survivors were hunted down over the following weeks. Valor wanted no one left who could rebuild, no one who could carry on the Emberborn legacy. But I survived, Eren said, his voice small. You were hidden. Your parents knew the attack was coming. They had warning, though not enough to save themselves or the others. They used the last of their magic to hide you, to place you in a state of suspended sleep, to erase your memories so that, even if you were found, you wouldn't know who you were. It was the only way to keep you safe. Tears were streaming down Eren's face now, hot against his cold cheeks. I don't remember them. My parents. I don't remember anything. Your mother's name was Alara, Kale said softly. She had dark hair like yours, and eyes that seemed to hold fire within them. She could create flames that sang, actual music, beautiful and haunting. Your father was Darien. He was a warrior mage, one of the finest the Emberborn ever produced. He could forge weapons from pure flame, solid and sharp as steel. Eren's chest felt like it was being crushed. He wrapped his arms around himself, trying to hold back sobs. They loved you more than anything, Kale continued, and there was something in his voice now: grief, yes, but also guilt. When they knew the end was coming, they didn't try to flee. They didn't try to save themselves. They used every ounce of their power, every last spark of their magic, to hide you away. To give you a chance at life, even if it meant you would never remember them. Why? Eren choked out. Why would they do that? Because you were their son. Because you carried the Emberborn legacy in your blood. Because they believed that as long as you lived, their guild wasn't truly dead. Kale turned to look at him, and in the starlight, his eyes seemed to glow faintly. They died protecting you, Eren. They died so you could live. Don't ever forget that. Eren couldn't hold back anymore. He buried his face in his hands and wept for parents he couldn't remember, for a home he'd never known, for a life that had been stolen from him before he was old enough to understand what he'd lost. The grief was overwhelming, a physical weight pressing down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Kale didn't try to comfort him, didn't offer empty words or false reassurances. He simply sat there, a silent presence in the darkness, keeping watch while Eren fell apart. I should have been there, Kale said quietly, almost to himself. I should have been able to stop it. Eren looked up, wiping at his eyes. What do you mean? But Kale had turned away, his face hidden in shadow. Get some rest. We have a long day tomorrow. Kale, sleep, Eren. We'll talk more when you're ready. It wasn't an answer, but Eren was too exhausted physically and emotionally to press further. He lay down on the cold ground, pulling his cloak tight around himself, and stared up at the stars. He tried to imagine his parents. Tried to picture his mother with her singing flames, his father with his weapons of fire. Tried to imagine what it would have been like to grow up in that fortress of black stone and flowing lava, surrounded by people who understood fire. Magic who could have taught him, guided him, helped him understand what he was. Instead, he had nothing. No memories, no family, no home. Just a stranger with secrets and a power he couldn't control. Perhaps that's a mercy, Kale had said earlier. Some memories are too painful to bear. But Eren didn't want mercy. He wanted the truth. He wanted to remember, even if it hurt. Because the not knowing was its own kind of pain, a hollow ache that nothing could fill. Eventually, exhaustion claimed him, pulling him down into sleep. But even in his dreams, he found no peace. He dreamed of fire and screaming, of a great fortress burning, of a woman with kind eyes pressing her hand to his chest and whispering words he couldn't quite hear. He dreamed of loss and woke with tears on his face. Eren dreamed. He was small, so small that the world seemed vast and towering around him. His hands were tiny, pudgy with childhood, reaching out toward warmth and light. He couldn't have been more than 3 years old, standing in a great hall carved from volcanic stone so black it seemed to drink in the light around it. But the hall wasn't dark. It glowed. Channels of molten rock flowed through grooves carved into the floor and walls, contained by magic and ancient engineering. The lava moved slowly, hypnotically, casting everything in shades of orange and gold. The heat should have been unbearable. The air shimmered above the flowing stone, distorting vision like looking through water, but it didn't burn. It felt right. Natural. Like coming home after a long journey through the cold. The walls were covered in carvings, intricate patterns of flames and phoenixes, of dragons breathing fire, of human figures with their hands raised and fire dancing between their fingers. Some of the carvings glowed faintly, as if the stone itself remembered the magic that had shaped it. The air smelled of sulfur and heat, of stone warmed beyond what sunlight could achieve, of something else too, cinnamon and clove, spices burning in braziers somewhere deeper in the fortress. Incense, perhaps, or offerings to the flame. A woman knelt before him, and even in the dream, even as a child who barely understood the world, Eren knew she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. She had dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, catching the light from the lava channels and seeming to glow with inner fire. Her eyes were the color of embers, not quite brown, not quite red, but something in between, warm and alive and full of love. Her skin was olive-toned, smooth, with laugh lines at the corners of her eyes and mouth. She wore robes of deep crimson and gold, the colors of the Emberborn, with the guild's symbol embroidered over her heart, a phoenix rising from flames. She was smiling at him, but there was sadness in that smile, a knowledge of something he was too young to understand. "Little flame," she said, and her voice was like music, like the crackling of a warm fire on a winter night. "Come here. Let me show you something." Child Eren toddled forward, his small legs unsteady, and she caught him gently, steadying him with hands that were warm but never burned. She smelled like cinnamon and smoke, like safety and home. "Do you know what you are?" she asked, brushing his dark hair back from his forehead with infinite tenderness. He shook his head, not understanding the question. "You are Emberborn," she said. "You carry fire in your blood, in your bones, in your very soul. It is a gift, little one. A precious, dangerous, beautiful gift." She held up her hand, palm facing upward, and fire bloomed there, not the wild, destructive fire Eren had summoned in his panic, but something controlled, deliberate, alive. The flames danced in her palm, shifting colors red to orange to gold to white blue at the edges. And then, impossibly, they began to sing. It wasn't a sound exactly, or not just a sound. It was a vibration that Eren felt in his chest, in his bones, a melody that seemed to resonate with something deep inside him. The flames moved in time with the music, rising and falling, spinning and swaying like dancers at a festival. Child Eren laughed with delight, clapping his small hands together. "Pretty, pretty fire." His mother smiled, and the flames sang louder, their melody joyful and bright. "Fire is not just destruction, my love. It is warmth. It is light. It is transformation. It can destroy, yes, but it can also create, protect, heal. The fire you carry within you is yours to shape. You must learn to understand it, to work with it, to respect it." She closed her hand, and the singing flames vanished, leaving only the warmth of her skin. She placed that hand over his small chest, right over his heart, and he felt something shift inside him, a warmth that spread from where she touched, flowing through his body like honey, like sunlight, like love made tangible. "I'm giving you a gift," she said softly, her ember eyes serious now. "A piece of my fire woven into yours. It will protect you when I cannot. It will guide you when you are lost. It will remind you always that you are loved. The warmth settled deep in his core, becoming part of him. It felt like her embrace, like her voice singing him to sleep, like every moment of safety and love he had ever known, concentrated into a single point of light that would never go out. "Remember, little flame," she whispered, and now there were tears in her eyes, though she was still smiling. "Remember who you are. Remember what you carry within you. No matter what happens, no matter how dark the world becomes, no matter how lost you feel, your fire will guide you home. My fire. Your father's fire. The fire of all the Emberborn who came before you." She pulled him close, holding him against her chest, and he could hear her heartbeat, steady and strong. She smelled like home. She felt like safety. "I love you," she whispered into his hair. "I love you more than all the stars in the sky, more than all the fire in the earth. Always remember that. No matter what comes. I love you, Aaron. I love you. Love you, Mama," child Aaron mumbled, his small arms wrapping around her neck. She held him for a long moment, and he felt her tears fall onto his hair, warm and wet. Then she pulled back, cupping his face in her hands, memorizing every detail. "Be brave, little flame," she said. "Be strong. Be kind. And never, never forget that you are Emberborn." Then the dream shifted. The warmth turned to heat, real heat, burning heat, the kind that seared and destroyed. The great hall was no longer glowing with controlled lava flows. It was burning. Real fire, wild and uncontrolled, consuming everything it touched. The beautiful carvings on the walls were blackening, cracking, falling away in chunks of superheated stone. The air was thick with smoke, acrid, choking, burning his lungs with every breath. He couldn't see more than a few feet in any direction. The smoke was everywhere, black and oily, carrying the smell of burning wood and something worse, burning flesh. People were screaming, running. Their voices were raw with terror, with pain, with the knowledge that they were going to die. Child Aaron was alone now, standing in the middle of the chaos, too small to understand what was happening, too frightened to do anything but cry. He called for his mother, his voice lost in the roar of flames and the screams of the dying. "Mama! Mama!" No answer. Just fire and smoke and screaming. Then there was an explosion, a wall collapsing, stone and fire erupting inward. The shockwave knocked him off his feet, and he hit the ground hard, the breath driven from his small lungs. He couldn't breathe, couldn't see, couldn't think. Strong hands grabbed him, lifted him. A man's voice, familiar and beloved, rough with smoke and fear. "I've got you, son. I've got you." His father. Tall and strong, with a beard and kind eyes that were now wild with terror and determination. He held Aaron against his chest with one arm while his other hand blazed with fire, not the singing flames of his mother, but weapons of pure heat, swords and shields of flame that he used to cut through the chaos. "It's all right," his father said, though his voice was shaking. "It's all right. I've got you. I won't let anything happen to you." For a moment, Aaron felt safe again. His father was strong. His father would protect him. Everything would be all right. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and fire. His father's flames cut through obstacles, cleared paths, held back the worst of the inferno. Other people ran past them, some he recognized, members of the guild, their faces twisted with fear. Some were carrying children. Some were alone. Some were burning. His father kicked open a door, and they burst into a chamber Aaron didn't recognize. His mother was there, and relief flooded through him, but she was hurt. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead. Her robes were torn and scorched. She was holding her side, and there was blood there too, seeping between her fingers. "Darian," she gasped when she saw them. "Thank the flames." "I thought, we're getting out," his father said. "All of us. Together." But even as he said it, there was another explosion. The ceiling cracked and chunks of stone began to fall. His father threw himself over Aaron, shielding him with his body. His mother screamed. Then his father was falling, and Aaron was falling with him, and there was fire everywhere, not the warm, safe fire of the lava channels, but hungry, consuming fire that wanted to devour everything. His father's grip loosened. Aaron was tumbling through smoke and heat and terror. He hit something hard. Pain exploded through his small body. He couldn't breathe. Couldn't see. Couldn't. His mother's face appeared above him, her beautiful face now streaked with blood and soot and tears. She was saying something, her lips moving, but he couldn't hear over the roar of the flames. She pressed her hand to his chest again, and this time the warmth that spread through him was different, deeper, more powerful, almost painful in its intensity. Her lips moved again, forming words he couldn't hear but somehow understood. Sleep. Little flame. Sleep and forget. Sleep and live. The world began to fade. The fire dimmed. The screaming grew distant. His mother's face was the last thing he saw, her ember eyes full of love and grief and desperate hope. Then darkness. Silence. Nothing. Aaron woke with a violent gasp, his body jerking upright so fast that his head spun. His heart was hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. He couldn't breathe, his lungs felt tight, constricted, as if the smoke from the dream was still choking him. He was drenched in sweat. His clothes clung to his skin, cold and clammy despite the warmth of the cloak wrapped around him. His hands were shaking, no, his whole body was shaking, trembling with the aftershocks of terror and grief. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. The dream had been so vivid, so real, that the rocky outcropping and the pre-dawn sky seemed wrong, impossible. He should be in the fortress. He should be with his mother. He should be dead. You should be dead. The thought hit him like a physical blow. Everyone else had died. His mother, his father, everyone in that fortress. They had all burned while he pressed his hands to his face, trying to hold back the sob that was building in his chest. His fingers came away wet. He was crying, tears streaming down his face, and he couldn't stop them. The images from the dream were already starting to fade, the way dreams always did, slipping away like water through his fingers. But these weren't just dreams. He knew that with absolute certainty. These were memories, real memories, returning after years of magical suppression. His mother's face. He could still see it, though the details were blurring. Dark hair. Ember eyes. A smile full of love and sadness. The way she had held him, the warmth of her embrace, the sound of her voice calling him little flame. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. His father's voice, rough with smoke and fear, I've got you, son. I've got you. The singing flames. The great hall of black stone and flowing lava. The smell of cinnamon and sulfur. The feeling of absolute safety, of being loved and protected and home. And then the fire. The real fire. The screaming. The blood. The terror. The moment when his father's grip had loosened and he had fallen into darkness. They had died for him. Both of them. His mother had used the last of her magic to hide him, to make him forget, to give him a chance at life. His father had fought through an inferno to reach him. They had sacrificed everything so he could survive. And he hadn't even remembered them. Hadn't known their names, their faces, what they had done for him. He had woken in the forest with nothing, no memories, no gratitude, no understanding of what had been lost. The guilt was overwhelming. It pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. How could he have forgotten them? How could he have lived these past days without even knowing they had existed? Bad dreams. Aaron's head snapped up. Cale was standing at the edge of the outcropping, silhouetted against the lightning sky. He hadn't heard the man approach. Cale moved too quietly for that, but he was there now, watching Aaron with those ancient, knowing eyes. Aaron's voice cracked. He swallowed hard, trying to compose himself, but the tears kept coming. I remembered. I think I remembered my mother. And my father. The fortress. The attack. He couldn't finish. The words dissolved into a sob that he couldn't hold back. Cale was silent for a long moment. Then he moved closer, settling onto a rock near Aaron but not touching him, giving him space to fall apart. The memories are returning, Kale said quietly. The magic your mother used to hide them, it was powerful, but it was never meant to last forever. It was designed to break down slowly, to let you remember when you were ready. Or when you were old enough to survive the remembering. I'm not ready, Aaron choked out. I'm not, I can't, you don't have a choice, Kale said, and there was something in his voice, not unkindness, but a hard truth that couldn't be softened. The past is part of you, Aaron. It shaped you, even when you couldn't remember it. The fire in your blood, the magic you carry, it all comes from them. From your parents, from the Emberborn, from everything that was lost. You can't run from it. You can only face it. They died for me, Aaron whispered. They died so I could live, and I didn't even remember them. I didn't. They died so you could have a chance, Kale interrupted. A chance to grow up, to become strong, to carry on their legacy. They didn't die so you could feel guilty. They died so you could live. Aaron wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand, trying to pull himself together. The sky was growing lighter, dawn approaching. Around them, the world was waking, birds beginning to sing, the wind picking up, carrying the scent of pine and morning dew. Will I remember everything? He asked. Eventually. Probably, Kale said. The magic is breaking down faster now that you're using your fire. Every time you call on your power, it weakens the barriers your mother placed. By the time we reach safety, you may remember everything, your childhood, your training, the day of the attack. All of it. I'm not sure I want to, Aaron admitted. If this is what remembering feels like, it will hurt, Kale said. There's no avoiding that. The memories you're recovering are painful ones. But there will be good memories too. Moments of joy, of love, of peace. Your parents loved you, Aaron. They loved you enough to give everything for you. That love is part of what you're remembering. Aaron thought of his mother's smile, of the warmth she had placed in his chest, of her voice calling him little flame. He thought of his father's strong arms, his determination to protect, his voice saying, I've got you, son. I wish I could have known them, he said quietly. Really known them. Not just fragments and dreams. You will, Kale said. As the memories return, you'll know them better than you think. You'll remember conversations, lessons, moments of ordinary life. The dreams are just the beginning. There was something in Kale's voice, a weight, a sadness that went beyond sympathy. Aaron looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the grief in those ancient eyes. You knew them, Aaron said. It wasn't a question. I did. Were you there? When the fortress fell. Kale's jaw tightened. For a moment, Aaron thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, no. I was elsewhere. Bound by other duties, other oaths. By the time I learned what was happening, it was too late. The fortress had fallen. The Emberborn were dead or scattered. I searched the ruins for survivors and found only you, hidden by your mother's magic, sleeping in a stasis that would last for years. You could have woken me then. No, Kale said. The magic was too delicate. Waking you prematurely would have killed you or driven you mad. I had to wait. Had to watch over you while you slept, keeping you safe, until the magic released you naturally. He paused. It was the longest wait of my very long life. Aaron stared at him, trying to process this. How long was I asleep? 10 years. The number hit Aaron like a physical blow. 10 years. He had been a child when the fortress fell, and he had slept through a decade of his life, hidden away while the world moved on without him. I should have been there, Kale said, so quietly Aaron almost didn't hear him. I should have been able to stop it. Or at least to die with them, as I was sworn to do. Instead, I failed them. Failed you. And now all I can do is try to keep you alive long enough to— He stopped abruptly, as if he'd said too much. Long enough to what? Aaron asked. But Kale was already standing, turning away. We should move. Dawn is here, and we have a long way to travel. Kale, get some rest if you can, Aaron. We leave in an hour. He walked away, leaving Aaron alone with his thoughts and his fragmentary memories and the growing certainty that Kale was carrying his own burden of guilt and grief. They broke camp as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Aaron's body ached from the cold ground and the emotional exhaustion of the night. His eyes felt gritty, his head heavy. But there was no time to rest. Kale was already moving, and Aaron had to follow. The landscape changed as they traveled, becoming more rugged and mountainous. The gentle hills and forests of the lowlands gave way to steeper terrain, rocky outcroppings, and sparse vegetation. The air grew thinner, colder, carrying the bite of altitude. Aaron's legs burned with the constant climbing. His feet were blistered inside his boots, each step sending jolts of pain up his calves. His shoulders ached from the weight of his pack, meager as it was, and his throat was perpetually dry despite the water he'd been drinking throughout the day. He was exhausted. Not just physically, but emotionally. The dreams had drained. Something from him left him feeling hollow and raw. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face, heard her voice. Little Flame. The memory was a gift and a curse, beautiful and agonizing in equal measure. Kale showed no signs of fatigue. He moved with the same steady, tireless pace he'd maintained since they'd met, never slowing, never stopping except when absolutely necessary. His breathing didn't change. His steps didn't falter. It was inhuman, and Aaron was beginning to understand that the word might be more literal than he'd thought. Around midday, they crested a ridge, and Aaron saw their destination in the distance. A town. Nestled in a valley below, surrounded by fields and forests. Smoke rose from chimneys, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. He could see buildings, streets, people moving like ants in the distance. It was larger than the logging camp, but smaller than he imagined Crosshaven to be. A real town with real people living real lives. The sight of it made something twist in Aaron's chest. Civilization. Safety. Or at least the illusion of it. That's Millbrook, Kale said. We'll rest there for a day, gather supplies, and then continue north. North? Aaron's voice was hoarse from disuse. Where are we going? To the guilds, Kale said. You need training and you need allies. The guilds can provide both. But you said Valor has influence over the guilds. Some of them. Not all. There are still those who remember the old ways, who honor the old oaths. We'll find them. Kale glanced at him. Can you make it down to the town, or do you need to rest first? Aaron wanted to say he needed rest. His body was screaming for it. But the thought of spending another night in the wilderness, another night of dreams and memories and cold ground, was unbearable. I can make it, he said. They descended into the valley. The path was steep and treacherous, loose stones sliding under their feet, but Kale navigated it with ease. Aaron followed more carefully, his exhausted legs threatening to give out with every step. As they approached Millbrook, Aaron felt his anxiety rising. This would be his first real contact with civilization since waking in the forest. Would people recognize him? Would Valor's hunters be waiting? Would someone see the fire in his eyes and know what he was? But Kale seemed unconcerned. He walked openly through the town gates, nodding to the guards as if he had every right to be there. The guards nodded back, their eyes sliding past Aaron without interest, as if he were invisible. How did you do that? Aaron whispered as they entered the town proper. Do what? Make them not notice me. I didn't do anything. You're just a young man traveling with his mentor. Nothing remarkable about that. But Aaron suspected there was more to it than that. There was something about Kale, some quality that made people look away, that made them forget to ask questions. It was subtle, but it was there, a kind of magic that had nothing to do with fire. Millbrook was unlike anything Aaron had seen since waking. The streets were paved with cobblestones, worn smooth by years of foot traffic and wagon wheels. Buildings lined the roads, some timber, some stone, all well-maintained and sturdy. Shops displayed their wares in windows, bread and pastries, bolts of cloth, tools and hardware, herbs and medicines. People were everywhere. Merchants calling out their prices, customers haggling, children running and playing, dogs barking. The noise was overwhelming after days of wilderness silence. The smells were intense, baking bread, roasting meat, horse manure, wood smoke, unwashed bodies, perfume, leather, 1,000 scents all mixing together. Aaron found himself staring at everything, trying to take it all in. This was normal life. This was what people did when they weren't running for their lives or sleeping in the wilderness. They bought bread. They talked to their neighbors. They laughed and argued and went about their business with the easy confidence of those who felt safe in their homes. This was what he'd lost when the Emberborn fell. Not just his family, not just his home, but this, the simple, ordinary life of being part of a community, of having a place in the world. The loss hit him like a physical blow, and he had to stop walking for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of it. Cale paused, looking back at him. Aaron. I'm fine, Aaron managed. It's a lot. Cale's expression softened slightly. I know. Come. We're almost there. He led Aaron through the streets to an inn called the Sleeping Bear. The sign showed a bear curled up in hibernation, painted in fading colors. The building was sturdy and welcoming, with warm light spilling from its windows and the sound of conversation drifting from within. Inside, the common room was everything Aaron hadn't known he was craving. Warmth from a fire crackling in a large stone hearth. The smell of cooking food, stew, fresh bread. Something sweet baking. Tables and chairs where people sat eating and drinking and talking. Laughter. Music from a corner where someone was playing a lute. It was beautiful. It was overwhelming. It was almost too much. Cale approached the innkeeper, a stout woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and a no-nonsense expression that suggested she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by any of it. 2 rooms for the night, Cale said. And meals. That'll be 4 silver, the woman said, her voice brisk and businesslike. Cale produced coins from somewhere. Aaron hadn't seen him carrying a purse, and placed them on the counter. The innkeeper swept them up with practiced efficiency and handed him 2 keys. Rooms are upstairs, 2nd and 3rd on the left. Dinner's at sunset. No fighting, no magic, no trouble. Understood, Cale said. They climbed a narrow staircase to the 2nd floor. The hallway was dim, lit by a single lantern, but clean. Cale stopped at the 2nd door and unlocked it, pushing it open. This is yours, he said, handing Aaron the key. Aaron stepped inside and felt something in his chest loosen. The room was small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, a small table with a basin and pitcher, and a single chair. But it was clean. The bed had actual sheets and a blanket that looked thick and warm. The window had shutters that could be closed against the cold. There was even a small mirror on the wall, the glass slightly warped but functional. It was the most beautiful thing Aaron had seen since waking in the forest. He sat on the bed experimentally, and the mattress gave beneath him. Not much. It was stuffed with straw and probably lumpy, but it was infinitely better than the cold ground. He nearly groaned with relief. Rest, Cale said from the doorway. We leave at dawn tomorrow. Where are we going? North. To Stoneheart Guild. They're the closest, and they have history with the Emberborn. They may be willing to help. And if they're not? Then we'll find someone who is. Cale turned to leave, then paused. Aaron, don't leave the inn without me. Don't talk to strangers. Don't use your magic. Valor's hunters are everywhere, and they're looking for any sign of you. I understand. Cale nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Aaron sat on the bed for a long moment, just breathing, trying to process everything. The room. The town. The memories from his dreams. The weight of what he was learning about his past. He should feel safe here. The inn was warm and comfortable. The door had a lock. Cale was just next door. But he didn't feel safe. He felt exposed, vulnerable, like a target waiting to be found. He lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The mattress was lumpy, just as he'd suspected, but it was still better than rocks and roots. His body ached in 1,000 places, his feet, his legs, his back, his shoulders. The exhaustion was bone deep, the kind that sleep might not fully cure. But despite the exhaustion, despite the comfort of the bed, he couldn't relax. His mind was too full. The dreams kept replaying in his head, his mother's face, her singing flames, the warmth she had placed in his chest. The attack, the fire, the screaming. His father's voice, I've got you, son. They had loved him. They had died for him. And he was only just beginning to remember them. The guilt was still there, heavy and cold in his stomach. But beneath it, there was something else now, a determination. They had given everything so he could live. The least he could do was make that sacrifice mean something. He would learn to control his fire. He would find allies. He would discover why Valor wanted him dead. And somehow, some way, he would make sure the Emberborn weren't forgotten. It was a promise made to ghosts, to memories, to parents he was only just beginning to know. But it was a promise nonetheless. Aaron closed his eyes, and despite his certainty that he wouldn't be able to sleep, exhaustion pulled him down into darkness. This time, mercifully, he didn't dream. Aaron woke to the sound of activity from the street below, voices calling out prices, wagon wheels creaking over cobblestones, the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer somewhere in the distance. For a moment, he lay still, disoriented by the unfamiliar sounds. His body ached in a dozen places, muscles protesting from days of running and sleeping on hard ground, but it was a different kind of ache than he'd grown accustomed to. This was the ache of recovery, of a body finally allowed to rest properly. Sunlight streamed through the window, warm and golden, painting stripes across the rough wooden floor. Dust motes danced in the light, and Aaron watched them for a long moment, marveling at how peaceful they seemed. How ordinary. When was the last time he'd woken to sunlight instead of cold dawn or the terror of pursuit? He sat up slowly, testing his body. His feet were still tender from blisters, but the worst of the pain had faded. His hands, he looked at them, turning them over in the morning light, showed no sign of the fire that had erupted from them days ago. They looked like normal hands. Human hands. But he knew better now. He knew what lived beneath his skin, waiting. The room was small but clean, and for the first time since awakening in the forest, Aaron felt almost safe. The bed had actual sheets, rough linen, but clean and dry. The blanket had kept him warm through the night. There was a basin of water on the small table, a sliver of soap beside it, and a cracked mirror on the wall. Simple things. Normal things. Things he hadn't realized he'd been craving until he had them. He stood and walked to the basin, catching sight of himself in the mirror. The face that looked back was almost a stranger's, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. His dark hair was a tangled mess, and there was a healing cut on his cheek he didn't remember getting. He looked like someone who'd been running for his life. Because he had been. Aaron splashed water on his face, the cold shocking him fully awake. He used the soap. It smelled faintly of lye and lavender to wash away the grime as best he could. The water in the basin turned gray-brown, and he had to refill it twice before he felt remotely clean. It was a luxury he hadn't known he'd missed so desperately. His clothes lay in a heap on the floor where he'd dropped them the night before. They were filthy, stained with dirt and sweat, torn in places from branches and thorns. The fabric was stiff with dried mud, and they smelled of smoke and fear. He couldn't wear them again. He had nothing else, but he couldn't. A knock at the door made him jump, his heart suddenly racing. His hand went instinctively to where a weapon should be, but he had nothing. "It's me," Kale's voice came from the other side, calm and measured. Aaron exhaled slowly, forcing his heartbeat to slow. He wrapped the blanket around himself and opened the door. Kale stood in the hallway, looking exactly as he had the night before, no sign of fatigue, no dishevelment, his clothes somehow still clean despite their journey. He held a bundle of folded fabric in his arms. "These should fit," he said, handing the bundle over. "Get cleaned up and meet me downstairs. We have things to do before we leave." Aaron took the clothes, feeling the quality of the fabric. I have resources," Kale said simply. "Get dressed. We don't have much time." He turned and walked away before Aaron could ask more questions. The clothes were simple but well made, a tunic of dark gray wool, trousers of sturdy brown canvas, and a cloak of deep green that would help him blend into forest shadows. There were also new boots, soft leather that fit better than his old ones, and thick socks that felt like heaven against his blistered feet. Everything fit reasonably well, as if Kale had somehow known his exact measurements. Aaron dressed slowly, savoring the feeling of clean clothes against clean skin. It was such a small thing, but it made him feel more human than he had since waking in the forest. More like a person and less like a hunted animal. He fastened the cloak around his shoulders and looked at himself in the mirror again. The transformation was remarkable. He still looked tired, still looked haunted, but he looked like someone who belonged in civilization. Someone who might have a purpose beyond simple survival. Downstairs, the common room was busier than it had been the night before. A dozen people sat at various tables, eating breakfast and talking in low voices. The smell of cooking food made Aaron's stomach clench with hunger: eggs and bacon, fresh bread, something sweet baking in the kitchen. His mouth watered. Cale sat at a corner table, positioned so he could see both the front door and the stairs. He had a plate of food in front of him but didn't seem to be eating much. His eyes tracked every person who entered or left, constantly assessing, constantly vigilant. Aaron joined him, sliding onto the bench across from him. The innkeeper, the same stern woman from the night before, appeared almost immediately with a plate for Aaron. Eggs scrambled with herbs, thick slices of bacon, bread still warm from the oven, and a small pot of honey. It was more food than he'd seen in days. "Eat," Cale said. "You'll need your strength." Aaron didn't need to be told twice. He ate ravenously, barely tasting the food in his hunger, shoveling it into his mouth with a desperation that might have embarrassed him if he'd had the presence of mind to care. The eggs were perfectly cooked, the bacon crispy and salty, the bread soft and sweet with honey. It was the best meal he could remember eating, though admittedly, his memory didn't extend very far. Cale watched him eat with an expression that might have been amusement or might have been sadness. It was hard to tell with him. "We need to visit the market," Cale said when Aaron had finished, pushing his own barely touched plate away. "You need proper supplies for the journey ahead. And I need to gather information." "Information about what?" Aaron asked, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "About Valor's movements. About which roads are safe and which are being watched. About whether anyone in this town has seen his hunters." Cale's eyes were distant. "Calculating. Information is often more valuable than weapons. And you think you'll find that in a market?" "I think I'll find it in the conversations people have when they think no one important is listening." Cale stood, dropping a few coins on the table. "Come. Stay close to me and try not to draw attention." They left the inn and made their way through the morning streets. Millbrook was fully awake now, people going about their daily business with the easy confidence of those who felt safe in their homes. Merchants opened their shops, sweeping the stoops and arranging their wares. Children ran past, laughing and playing some game Aaron didn't recognize. A woman hung laundry from a second-story window, singing softly to herself. It was so normal, so ordinary. And it made Aaron's chest ache with a longing he couldn't quite name. This was what he'd lost when the Emberborn fell. Not just his family, not just his home, but this, the simple, everyday life of being part of a community. Of having a place in the world. Of waking up each morning knowing where you belonged. The market square was in the center of town, a large open area paved with worn cobblestones that had been smoothed by decades of foot traffic. Merchants had set up stalls in neat rows, their awnings creating a patchwork of colors: red and blue and green and gold, all fluttering gently in the morning breeze. The square was already crowded with people, and the noise was overwhelming. Aaron stopped at the edge of the square, suddenly unable to move forward. The sheer amount of everything, the people, the sounds, the smells, the colors, it was too much. His senses, sharpened by days in the wilderness, were assaulted from every direction. Vendors called out their wares in sing-song voices: fresh fish, caught this morning, apples and pears, sweet as honey, fine cloth from the southern mills, charms and trinkets, guaranteed authentic. The smells were even more intense: roasting meat from a food stall, the earthy scent of fresh vegetables, the tang of leather from a cobbler's booth, the sweet perfume of flowers, the acrid smell of metal from a blacksmith's forge at the edge of the square. Underneath it, all was the smell of too many people in too small a space: sweat and perfume and unwashed bodies and horse manure from the street. "Breathe," Cale said quietly beside him. "It's overwhelming at first, but you'll adjust." "How do people live like this?" Aaron whispered. So many people, so close together. Most people find comfort in crowds. Safety in numbers. Kale's hand rested briefly on Aaron's shoulder, steadying him. But we're not most people. Come. We have shopping to do. Kale moved through the crowd with purpose, and Aaron followed, trying not to stare at everything around him. But it was impossible not to look. A woman at a vegetable stall was haggling with a customer over the price of carrots, her voice sharp but not unkind. A group of children clustered around a toy seller, their faces pressed against the display of wooden soldiers and carved animals. Two old men sat on a bench, playing some kind of board game and arguing good-naturedly about the rules. These were ordinary people living ordinary lives. They weren't running from hunters. They weren't hiding from a mysterious enemy who wanted them dead. They were just living, going about their business, buying food and clothes and trinkets, worrying about prices and whether their children were behaving. Aaron felt a sharp pang of envy. What would it be like to have such simple concerns? To worry about the cost of carrots instead of whether you'd survive the night? They stopped at a stall selling travel supplies, bedrolls, water skins, rope, flint, and steel. Kale examined the goods with a critical eye, testing the quality of the materials. The merchant, a middle-aged man with a weathered face and calloused hands, watched him with the patient expression of someone who dealt with particular customers before. Looking for anything specific? The merchant asked. Quality, Kale replied. We have a long journey ahead. Don't we all? The merchant said philosophically. He pulled out a water skin made of treated leather. This one's my best. Won't leak, won't crack in the cold. Cost you 3 silver. Kale examined it, then nodded. We'll take 2. And a bedroll. Aaron watched the transaction with growing discomfort. He had no money. Nothing to contribute. He was completely dependent on Kale's generosity, and it made him feel useless. Childlike. As if sensing his thoughts, Kale glanced at him. You'll repay me by staying alive, he said quietly. That's payment enough. They continued through the market, and Kale purchased other supplies, dried meat, hard cheese, a small cooking pot, a whetstone. Practical things for travel. Aaron tried to memorize what was being bought and why, filing the information away for a future where he might need to know such things. At a weapons stall, Kale stopped and spent several minutes examining the merchandise. The stall was run by a burly man with a scar across his nose and the build of someone who'd used weapons professionally. Swords hung from hooks, their blades gleaming in the sunlight. Daggers of various sizes were displayed on a velvet cloth. There were also bows, arrows, and even a few pieces of light armor. Kale selected a simple dagger with a leather-wrapped handle and a blade about as long as Aaron's hand. He tested the balance, then nodded in satisfaction. This one, he said, handing coins to the merchant. Then he turned and offered the dagger to Aaron, handle first. Aaron stared at it, not taking it. I don't know how to use a dagger. Then you'll learn, Kale said. But hopefully you won't need to. Keep this with you at all times. If we're separated, you'll need a way to defend yourself. Aaron took the dagger reluctantly. It was heavier than he'd expected, the weight unfamiliar in his hand. The blade was sharp, he could tell just by looking at it, and the thought of using it on another person made his stomach turn. I've never. He started, then stopped. I don't think I could actually stab someone. You'd be surprised what you can do when your life depends on it, Kale said, not unkindly. But the dagger is a last resort. Your fire is a better weapon, once you learn to control it. The merchant was watching them with interest. Fire magic, eh? Don't see many fire mages these days. Not since the Emberborn fell. Aaron's head snapped up. You knew about the Emberborn? Everyone knows about the Emberborn, lad. Or knew, I should say. Terrible business, what happened to them? The merchant shook his head. My grandfather used to trade with them, back in the day. Said they were good people. Honorable. Didn't deserve what they got. What did they get? Aaron asked, even though he already knew. Even though Kale had told him. He needed to hear it from someone else, needed confirmation that it was real. Destroyed, the merchant said bluntly. Their whole guild, burned to the ground. Some say it was Valor who did it, though nobody knows for sure. All I know is that one day they were there, and the next they were gone. Every last one of them. Not every last one, Aaron said quietly. The merchant looked at him sharply. You saying we need to go, Cale interrupted, his hand on Aaron's arm. Thank you for your service. He pulled Aaron away from the stall before the merchant could ask more questions. You need to be more careful, Cale said in a low voice as they walked. The fewer people who know who you are, the safer you'll be. I didn't tell him anything. You told him enough. A fire mage who knows about the Emberborn? It doesn't take much to connect those dots. Cale's expression was stern. Remember, Aaron, Valor has spies everywhere. Anyone could be watching. Anyone could be listening. Aaron felt chastened. He hadn't thought about it that way. He'd just been so desperate to talk to someone who remembered the Emberborn, who knew they'd existed, who could confirm that his parents and his home had been real. They continued through the market, and Aaron found himself drawn to a stall selling books. The stall was smaller than the others, tucked into a corner of the square, and it was run by an elderly man with wire-rimmed spectacles perched on his nose. Books were stacked on the table in haphazard piles, their leather covers worn and faded. Some looked ancient, their pages yellowed with age. Others were newer, their bindings still crisp. The old man looked up as Aaron approached, and his face creased into a smile. Ah, a fellow. Lover of knowledge. Welcome, welcome. Looking for anything in particular, young man? Aaron hesitated. I don't know. I can't really afford anything. Browsing is free, the merchant said kindly, gesturing to the books. And knowledge is worth more than gold, in my opinion. Far more portable, too. You can't carry a chest of gold in your head, but you can carry entire libraries. Aaron smiled despite himself. There was something comforting about the old man's enthusiasm. He picked up a book at random and opened it carefully. The pages were covered in dense text, discussing magical theory in terms he didn't fully understand. But he found himself drawn to it anyway, his eyes scanning the words, trying to make sense of them. He flipped through several pages, then stopped when a particular passage caught his eye. Fire magic is the most primal of the elemental arts, drawing on the fundamental force of transformation. To master fire is to master change itself, to understand that destruction and creation are two sides of the same coin. The greatest fire mages do not simply command flame, they become flame, burning away the old to make way for the new. Fire is not merely a tool or a weapon, it is a philosophy, a way of understanding the world. Everything that burns is transformed. Everything that is transformed is reborn. Aaron read the passage 3 times, his heart beating faster with each reading. Become flame. That was what had happened in the forest, wasn't it? When the fire had erupted from him, it hadn't felt like he was controlling something external. It had felt like he was the fire, like the flames were an extension of his own body, his own will. Interested in fire magic? The merchant asked, noticing what Aaron was reading. He came around the table to stand beside him, peering at the page. Ah, yes. Principles of Elemental Transformation by Magister Aldrin Flameheart. One of the great theoretical works on fire magic. Written about 60 years ago, if I remember correctly. Flameheart. Aaron looked up sharply. Was he part of the Emberborn? Indeed he was. One of their finest scholars, from what I understand. He wrote extensively about the philosophy of fire magic, about how it's not just about power, but about understanding the nature of change itself. The old man adjusted his spectacles. Dangerous art, fire magic. Beautiful, but dangerous. The Emberborn were the masters of it, back in the day. Terrible what happened to them. What do you know about what happened? Aaron asked, trying to keep his voice casual. About the Emberborn's fall? The merchant sighed, his expression growing somber. Only what everyone knows, I suppose. They were destroyed years ago, 10, maybe 12 years back. Their guild burned to the ground, and everyone in it killed. Some say it was Valor who did it, though nobody knows for sure. There were rumors of a great battle, of fire that could be seen for miles, of screaming that lasted through the night. He shook his head. All I know for certain is that fire mages have been rare ever since. The knowledge was lost with them. Books like this one, he tapped the volume in Aaron's hands, are all that remain of their wisdom. Not all of it, Aaron said quietly, his fingers tightening on the book. Not all the knowledge was lost. The merchant looked at him curiously, his eyes sharp behind his spectacles. You sound like you know something about it. Are you a fire mage yourself, young man? Aaron hesitated. He wanted to say yes. Wanted to claim that heritage, to acknowledge what he was. But Cale's warning echoed in his mind. Anyone could be watching. Anyone could be listening. I'm interested in learning, he said carefully. About fire magic. About the Emberborn. About what they were and what they believed. A worthy pursuit, the merchant said, nodding approvingly. The Emberborn believed that fire was sacred, that it represented transformation and renewal. They didn't just use fire, they honored it, respected it, understood it as a living force. He paused, then added quietly, they also believed that with great power came great responsibility. That fire could create or destroy, and the choice between the two defined the mage. Aaron thought about the hunter in the forest, the man whose weapon he'd incinerated. The terror in the man's eyes as the flames had consumed the crossbow. Had that been creation or destruction? Had he had a choice? How much for the book? He asked suddenly. The merchant smiled. For someone genuinely interested in preserving the Emberborn's legacy? 5 silver. Aaron's heart sank. He didn't have 5 silver. He didn't have any silver. He started to hand the book back, but the merchant held up a hand. However, the old man said, his eyes twinkling, I'm willing to make an exception for a young scholar. Consider it a loan. Take the book, read it, learn from it. When you're able, come back and pay me. Or don't. Knowledge should be shared, not hoarded. I couldn't, Aaron started. You can and you will, the merchant said firmly, pressing the book into Aaron's hands. The Emberborn believed in passing knowledge to the next generation. Consider this my small contribution to that tradition. Aaron clutched the book to his chest, overwhelmed by the gesture. Thank you. I don't know what to say. Say you'll read it. Say you'll learn from it. Say you'll remember what the Emberborn stood for. The old man's expression was serious now. And say you'll be careful, young man. If you truly are interested in fire magic, there are those who would see that interest as a threat. Before Aaron could respond, Cale appeared at his elbow, moving so silently that Aaron jumped. We need to go, Cale said urgently, his voice low and tense. Now. But I was just, Aaron started. Now, Aaron. There was something in Cale's tone that brooked no argument, an edge of danger that made Aaron's instincts scream. Thank you, Aaron said quickly to the merchant, then turned to follow Cale. They moved quickly through the crowd, Cale's hand on Aaron's shoulder, guiding him. Aaron clutched the book to his chest, his heart pounding. What's wrong? He asked when they were clear of the immediate crowd. Hunters, Cale said grimly, his eyes scanning the market. 3 of them just entered the square from the north side. They're searching for someone. For me. Aaron's voice came out higher than he intended. Possibly. Probably. Cale's jaw was tight. We need to get back to the inn, gather our things and leave. Immediately. Aaron risked a glance back over his shoulder and saw them, 3 figures in dark traveling clothes, moving through the crowd with purpose. They weren't running, weren't drawing attention to themselves, but there was something about the way they moved that set them apart. They were scanning faces, looking for someone specific. Looking for him. His hand went instinctively to the dagger at his belt, and he felt the familiar heat beginning to build in his palms. Not now. Not here, surrounded by innocent people. They hurried through the streets, Cale leading them along a route that avoided the main thoroughfares. They ducked down side streets and cut through alleys, moving quickly but not running. Running would draw attention. Aaron's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears, and his hands were starting to tingle with suppressed fire. They reached the inn without incident and quickly climbed the stairs to their rooms. Cale moved with swift efficiency, gathering their supplies and checking the window for escape routes. Pack everything, he said. We leave in 2 minutes. Aaron shoved his few belongings into his pack, the new clothes, the supplies they'd bought, the book from the merchant. His hands were shaking, making it difficult to work the straps. Kale appeared in his doorway. Ready? I think so. Then let's go. They descended the back stairs, the ones used by servants, and Kale paused at the bottom to hand several coins to the innkeeper. We're staying another night, he said loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. Don't disturb our rooms. The innkeeper nodded, pocketing the coins. As you wish. To avoid suspicion, Kale explained quietly to Aaron as they slipped out the back entrance into an alley that ran behind the buildings. If they search the inn, they'll think we're still here. The alley was narrow and smelled of garbage and stale water. Aaron wrinkled his nose, but followed Kale without complaint. They moved quickly, Kale navigating the back ways of Millbrook with the confidence of someone who'd memorized the town's layout in the brief time they'd been there. They were almost to the north gate when Aaron heard a shout behind them. There. That's him. Aaron turned and saw 3 figures in dark clothes running toward them, the hunters from the market. One of them was pointing directly at him. Run, Kale said, his voice deadly calm. They ran. The north gate was ahead, its wooden doors standing open to allow traffic in and out of the town. Kale and Aaron sprinted toward it, weaving between merchants' carts and startled pedestrians. Behind them, the hunters' boots pounded against the cobblestones there. Pursuit relentless and coordinated. Move, one of the hunters shouted at the civilians in their path. Guild business. The crowd parted instinctively at the words, and Aaron felt his stomach drop. Guild business. That meant authority, legitimacy. These weren't just mercenaries, they had backing, resources, the weight of institutional power behind them. His lungs burned as he ran, his pack bouncing against his back with every stride. The book from the merchant pressed against his spine, a reminder of everything he was trying to understand, everything he might never get the chance to learn if they caught him. Kale moved ahead with impossible grace, his feet barely seeming to touch the ground. He glanced back once, his eyes meeting Aaron's, and there was something in that look, calculation, concern, and a flicker of something else. Something that made Aaron's skin prickle with unease. They burst into the main thoroughfare leading to the north gate, and Aaron saw the guards. Stationed there, 2 men in leather armor with the town's crest emblazoned on their chests. They looked bored, leaning against the gate posts, but they straightened as Kale and Aaron approached at a dead run. Stop them, one of the hunters shouted from behind. They're fugitives. Wanted by the guilds. The guards moved to block the gate, hands going to their weapons. One drew a short sword, the other reached for a cudgel at his belt. Their faces were set with the grim determination of men doing their duty. Kale didn't slow down. If anything, he accelerated, closing the distance to the guards in seconds. Aaron's heart hammered in his chest. They were going to crash into armed men. This was going to end in violence, in blood, but as they reached the guards, Kale made a subtle gesture with his hand, fingers moving in a pattern too quick for Aaron to follow. His lips moved, forming words that Aaron couldn't hear over the pounding of his own pulse. And the guards' expressions changed. The hardness in their eyes melted away, replaced by confusion. Their pupils dilated, unfocused, as if they were looking at something very far away. The sword lowered. The cudgel hung loose in its owner's grip. Let us pass, Kale said, his voice carrying an odd resonance, not louder, but deeper, as if it was coming from somewhere beneath the earth itself. The guards stepped aside without a word, their movements mechanical, dreamlike. They didn't look at Kale or Aaron as they passed. They didn't look at anything. Their eyes were empty, glazed, seeing nothing. Aaron stumbled through the gate, his breath coming in ragged gasps, and risked a glance back. The hunters had reached the guards and were shouting at them, demanding to know why they'd let the fugitives through. But the guards just stared at them with those empty eyes, their mouths working soundlessly, as if they'd forgotten how to form words. What did you do to them? Aaron gasped as they ran down the road leading away from Millbrook. Clouded their minds, Kale said, not even breathing hard. It won't last long, but it should buy us time. Aaron couldn't find the words. He'd seen Kale fight with supernatural skill, had watched him move faster than any human should be able to move. But this was different. This was magic, real magic, the kind that reached into someone's mind and twisted it. "Keep running," Kale said. "We're not safe yet." They ran until Millbrook was out of sight behind them, the town's walls and towers disappearing behind a bend in the road. Aaron's legs felt like jelly, his lungs burning with every breath. Sweat poured down his face despite the cool morning air. His feet were screaming in protest, blisters forming where his new boots rubbed against his heels. Finally, when Aaron thought he might collapse, Kale slowed to a fast walk. Aaron bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. His vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges. "How are you not tired?" Aaron asked between gasps, straightening up to look at Kale. Kale wasn't even sweating. His breathing was steady, calm, as if they'd been out for a leisurely stroll rather than running for their lives. "Practice," he said. "And other things." "You keep saying that. Other things. What does that mean?" Aaron's voice came out sharper than he intended, frustration and fear mixing into anger. "What did you do to those guards?" "That wasn't fire magic. That was something else entirely." Kale didn't answer, just kept walking. His eyes scanned the road ahead, the trees on either side, constantly vigilant. "Kale, not now, Aaron. We need to put more distance between us and the town." They followed the road north for several hours, Aaron's exhaustion growing with every step. The landscape changed gradually as they walked, the gentle farmland around Millbrook giving way to wilder terrain. The road became rougher, less maintained, with grass growing between the wheel ruts. Trees pressed closer on either side, their branches forming a canopy overhead that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns on the ground. Around midday, Kale led them off the road entirely, cutting into the forest along a game trail that was barely visible. "The road will be watched," he explained. "Valor's hunters will expect us to follow it. We need to travel where they won't think to look." The forest was dense here, the undergrowth thick with ferns and brambles. Aaron had to watch every step to avoid tripping over roots or getting tangled in thorny vines. His clothes caught on branches, his pack snagged on low-hanging limbs. The air was thick with the smell of decomposing leaves and damp earth. His body ached in a dozen places. His feet throbbed with every step. His shoulders burned from the weight of his pack. His throat was dry despite the water he'd been drinking from his water skin. He wanted nothing more than to stop, to rest, to sleep for a week. But Kale kept moving, tireless and relentless, and Aaron had no choice but to follow. As the afternoon wore on, the terrain grew more challenging. They climbed steep hillsides, where Aaron had to use his hands to pull himself up, his fingers digging into the soil for purchase. They descended into ravines where streams ran cold and clear, the water so icy it made Aaron's teeth ache when he drank. They pushed through thickets of thorns that left scratches on his arms and face. Through it all, Kale moved with that same impossible grace, never stumbling, never hesitating. Aaron found himself watching his guide with growing unease. There was something fundamentally wrong about the way Kale moved, the way he never seemed to tire, the way he'd clouded those guards' minds with a gesture and a word. "What are you?" Aaron wanted to ask, but he was afraid of the answer. As evening approached, they reached a small clearing beside a stream. The water burbled over smooth stones, and the clearing was carpeted with soft moss. Kale finally stopped, surveying the area with his usual careful assessment. "We'll camp here," he said. "We're far enough from the road that a fire should be safe." Aaron nearly collapsed with relief. He dropped his pack and sat heavily on a fallen log, his legs trembling with exhaustion. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest. He pulled off his boots and winced at the sight of his feet. Blisters had formed on both heels and several toes, some of them already burst and weeping. Kale gathered wood with efficient movements and built a fire in the center of the clearing. Within minutes, flames were crackling cheerfully, casting dancing shadows across the moss. The warmth was heavenly, and Aaron found himself leaning toward it, soaking in the heat. "Eat," Kale said, handing him some of the dried meat and hard cheese they'd bought in Millbrook. "You need to keep your strength up." Aaron ate mechanically, too tired to taste the food. His mind kept replaying the chase through Millbrook, the hunter shouts, the guards' empty eyes. the fear he'd felt when he'd thought they were caught. "Why are they so determined to find me?" he asked when he'd finished eating. "I'm just one person. Why does Valor care so much?" Kale was silent for a moment, staring into the fire. The flames reflected in his eyes, making them seem to glow. "Because you're not just one person," he said finally. "You're the last of the Emberborn. As long as you live, there's a chance the guild could be rebuilt. Valor can't allow that. He needs the Emberborn to stay dead." "But I don't know anything about rebuilding a guild," Aaron protested. "I don't even know how to control my magic properly." "I'm not a threat to anyone." "Not yet," Kale agreed. "But you will be. You have the potential to become more powerful than any fire mage in generations. Your bloodline is pure, untainted by the dilution that comes from mixing with non-magical families. You carry the legacy of the Emberborn in your very bones." He paused, his expression growing distant. "That's what Valor fears. Not what you are now, but what you could become." Aaron stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. He thought about the fire that had erupted from his hands in the forest, the way it had felt both foreign and familiar. Like something that had always been part of him, just waiting to be awakened. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "You can ask. I may not answer. How old are you?" Kale was silent for a long moment. The fire crackled, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkening sky. "Older than you can imagine," he said finally. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can give you right now." Kale's voice was gentle but firm. "There are things you need to understand about yourself, about your past, before you can understand the truth about me. Trust that I will tell you when the time is right." Aaron wanted to press the issue, but something in Kale's expression stopped him. There was a weight there, a burden that went beyond simple secrets. Whatever Kale was hiding, it was something that caused him pain. "Tell me about my parents," Aaron said instead. "You said you knew of them. What were they like?" Kale's expression softened slightly. "Your father was Aldrin Flameheart. He was a master of flame manipulation. He could shape fire into any form he desired, could make it burn hot enough to melt stone or gentle enough to warm without consuming. He was known for his creativity, his ability to see possibilities in fire that others missed." "Aldrin," Aaron repeated, testing the name on his tongue. It felt right somehow. Familiar in a way he couldn't explain. "And my mother?" "Your mother was Lissa Emberdon. She specialized in heat control. She could make fire burn without consuming fuel, could warm an entire building with a thought, could draw heat from one place and transfer it to another. She was known for her precision, her delicate touch. Where your father was bold and dramatic, your mother was subtle and refined." "Lissa," Aaron whispered. The name hit him like a physical blow, and suddenly he was seeing her face again, the woman from his dream, with her dark hair and ember eyes, calling him her little flame. "I remember her. I think I had a dream about her. She was teaching me something about fire." Kale nodded slowly. "The memories are returning. Your mother's magic is breaking down, piece by piece. Soon you'll remember everything, your childhood, your training, the day of the attack. All of it." "I'm not sure I want to," Aaron admitted. "If the memories are all like the ones I've had so far, the fire, the screaming, the death, I don't know if I can handle it." "You can," Kale said with quiet certainty. "You're stronger than you know, Aaron. You survived when everyone else died. You endured 10 years of magical stasis that would have killed most people. You've awakened with your mind intact and your magic growing stronger every day. You have your parents' strength in you, their courage, their determination. You will survive this too." Aaron felt tears prickling at his eyes. He blinked them back, not wanting to cry in front of Kale. But the weight of it all was overwhelming, the loss, the fear, the responsibility of being the last of his kind. "They died for me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "My parents. They used their magic to hide me, to keep me safe, and they died because of it." "They died so you could live," Kale corrected gently. "There's a difference. They didn't die because of you, they died for you. They chose to give their lives so you would have a chance at a future. That's not a burden you should carry as guilt. It's a gift you should honor. By living the life they wanted for you." Aaron wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. "How do I do that? How do I honor them when I don't even remember them properly? By becoming the person they believed you could be. By learning to control your magic. By understanding your heritage. By carrying the Emberborn legacy forward. Kale paused, then added quietly, and by not letting Valor win. By refusing to let their sacrifice be in vain. They sat in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them. The forest around them was alive with night sounds, crickets chirping, an owl hooting in the distance, the rustle of small creatures moving through the undergrowth. The stars were beginning to appear overhead, visible through gaps in the canopy. Aaron found himself thinking about the scale of what he was facing. Valor wasn't just one man. He was a force that commanded hunters across multiple regions, that had the resources to destroy entire guilds, that had been hunting Emberborn survivors for years. And Aaron was supposed to stand against that? A young man who couldn't even control his own magic, who had no memories, no training, no allies beyond the mysterious stranger sitting across from him? It seemed impossible. Hopeless. But then he thought about his parents, Aldrin and Lissa, and the sacrifice they'd made. They had believed he was worth saving. They had believed he could survive, could grow strong, could carry on their legacy. He couldn't let them down. He wouldn't. Kale, he said, his voice stronger now. When we get to Snowheart, when I start training properly, I want to learn everything. Not just fire magic, but everything about the Emberborn. Their history, their techniques, their philosophy. I want to understand what I'm carrying forward. Kale smiled slightly, the first genuine smile Aaron had seen from him. That's the spirit. Your parents would be proud. They settled in for the night, Kale taking first watch while Aaron wrapped himself in his cloak. And tried to sleep. But sleep was slow in coming. His mind kept churning, processing everything he'd learned, everything he'd experienced. He was the last of the Emberborn, the son of Aldrin and Lissa, a fire mage with the potential to become more powerful than any in generations. And somewhere out there, Valor was hunting him, determined to ensure the Emberborn stayed dead. The weight of it pressed down on him, heavy and inescapable. But beneath the fear, beneath the doubt, there was something else growing, a determination, a resolve. He would survive this. He would learn to control his magic. He would understand his heritage. And somehow, some way, he would make sure his parents' sacrifice meant something. As he finally drifted off to sleep, the last thing he saw was Kale sitting by the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames, keeping watch over him with the patience of someone who had been doing so for far longer than Aaron could imagine. Tell me about Snowheart Guild, Aaron said instead. What are they like? They're earth mages, Kale said. Masters of stone and metal. Their guild is built into a mountain, carved from the living rock. They value strength, endurance, and craftsmanship. They're not as flashy as fire mages, but they're solid. Dependable. Will they help us? I don't know. They have their own concerns, their own politics. But they have history with the Emberborn. There was a time when the two guilds worked closely together, when fire and earth mages collaborated on great works. If anyone will remember that alliance, it's Stoneheart. And if they don't, then we'll find another way. They fell silent after that, each lost in their own thoughts. Aaron found himself thinking about the woman from his dream, his mother. He was sure of it now. He tried to remember more about her, but the memory remained frustratingly vague. Kale, he said quietly. Did you know my parents? I knew of them. I never met them personally, but I knew their reputation. They were powerful mages, respected within the Emberborn. Your father was a master of flame manipulation. Your mother specialized in heat control. She could make fire burn without consuming, could warm an entire building with a thought. What were their names? Your father was Aldrin. Your mother was Lissa. Aaron repeated the names silently, trying to attach them to the faces from his dream. Aldrin. Lissa. His parents. They loved you very much, Kale said softly. Everything they did to protect you. Remember that. Aaron nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He lay down by the fire, pulling his cloak around him, and closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, he dreamed of a woman with fire in her eyes, calling him her little flame. The first day of their journey north began with promise. Dawn broke clear and cool, the sky a pale wash of blue that deepened as the sun climbed. They left their camp by the stream and struck out across rolling countryside that reminded Aaron of the lands around. Millbrook, gentle hills covered in grass and wildflowers, scattered copses of oak and ash, the occasional farmstead visible in the distance. But as the morning wore on, the landscape began to change. The hills grew steeper, the soil rockier. The grass gave way to scrub brush and hardy wildflowers that clung to thin earth. Trees became less frequent, their trunks gnarled and twisted by wind. The air itself felt different, thinner, sharper, carrying the scent of stone and distance. Aaron's legs burned with the constant climbing. Every hill seemed steeper than the last, and his pack, which had felt manageable that morning, now seemed to weigh twice what it should. His shoulders ached where the straps dug in. His feet throbbed with every step, the blisters from their flight from Millbrook not yet fully healed. "How much farther today?" he asked, trying to keep the exhaustion from his voice. "Until we find a suitable place to camp," Cale replied without slowing his pace. "We need to cover as much ground as possible while the weather holds." Aaron looked up at the cloudless sky. "The weather seems fine for now, but we're heading into the mountains. Weather changes quickly there, and without warning. We need to reach Stoneheart before the autumn storms begin." They walked in silence for a while, Aaron focusing on putting one foot in front of the other. His mind wandered as he walked, drifting between memories of his mother's face in his dreams and the reality of the endless road ahead. He thought about Marta at the logging camp, wondered if she was safe, if the hunters had questioned her about him. The guilt of that possibility sat heavy in his chest. Around midday, they crested a particularly steep hill and Aaron stopped, breathing hard. Below them, the land stretched out in a patchwork of fields and forest, but in the distance, far to the north, he could see them clearly now. Mountains. Real mountains. Not the gentle hills they'd been climbing. These were massive, their peaks sharp and white, with snow that gleamed in the sunlight. "Stoneheart is in those mountains," Cale said, pointing toward the range. "Another week's travel, if we maintain our pace and encounter no delays." "A week." Aaron groaned, his legs trembling with fatigue. His feet were screaming in his boots, and he was tired of sleeping on the ground, tired of the constant walking, tired of being tired. "You'll get used to it," Cale said without sympathy. "This is your life now, Aaron. Travel, training, survival. The sooner you accept that, the easier it will be." "Easy for you to say," Aaron muttered. "You don't even get tired." Cale glanced back at him, and for a moment something flickered in his eyes, not quite amusement, but close. "I've had more practice than you. Come. We still have hours of daylight left." They descended the hill and continued north. The road they followed was little more than a dirt track now, rutted by wagon wheels and marked by the occasional stone cairn. They encountered other travelers, a merchant with a cart full of pottery, a family of pilgrims. Heading south toward some distant shrine, a pair of young men who might have been soldiers or bandits, it was hard to tell. Each time, Cale steered them off the road, waiting in the cover of trees or behind rocky outcroppings until the travelers passed. Aaron understood the caution, but it made their journey longer, more exhausting. Every detour added distance, and his body was already protesting the miles they'd covered. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, they came upon a small stream. Cale finally called a halt, and Aaron nearly collapsed with relief. He dropped his pack, pulled off his boots, and plunged his aching feet into the cold water. The relief was immediate and overwhelming. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath, feeling the tension drain from his muscles. His feet were a mess, new blisters had formed on top of the old ones, and his toes were raw where they'd rubbed against the leather. "You need to toughen up," Cale said, building a small fire. "Your body isn't used to this kind of travel." "No kidding," Aaron replied, examining his feet with dismay. "How long until it gets easier?" "Depends on you. Some people adapt quickly. Others never do." Cale handed him some dried meat, and hard bread. Eat. You need to keep your strength up. They ate in silence as darkness fell. The fire crackled cheerfully, and somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted. Aaron found himself thinking about the journey ahead, another week of this, maybe more. His body already felt like it was falling apart. How was he supposed to train with Torvin if he could barely walk? Tell me about Stowheart, he said, partly to distract himself from his aching muscles. What should I expect? Kale was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. Stowheart is different from other guilds. They value strength, both physical and magical. They're warriors first, mages second. Their magic is tied to the earth, stone, metal, the bones of the mountains themselves. Will they help us? That depends on many things. Magistrate Kara is pragmatic. She'll weigh the risks against the potential benefits. Having the last Emberborn under her roof could be seen as an opportunity or a liability. A liability, Aaron repeated bitterly. That's what I am, isn't it? A liability. Everyone who helps me ends up in danger. That's the reality of your situation, Kale said bluntly. But it doesn't mean you're not worth helping. The Emberborn represented something important, a balance of power, a check against tyranny. If you can be trained, if you can reclaim even a fraction of what was lost, you could change the balance of power among the guilds. And if I can't? Then Valor wins. And the world becomes a darker place. The weight of that settled over Aaron like a heavy cloak. He lay down by the fire, pulling his blanket around him, and tried to sleep. But his mind kept churning, processing everything Kale had said, everything he'd learned. The responsibility felt crushing. The second day was harder than the first. Aaron woke with his muscles stiff and protesting. Every movement sent sharp pains through his legs and back. His feet were worse, the blisters had burst during the night, and putting his boots back on was agony. But Kale showed no mercy. They broke camp at dawn and set out again, climbing steadily into higher country. The landscape continued to change around them. The gentle farmland was far behind now, replaced by wilder terrain, rocky hillsides covered in heather and gorse, steep valleys where streams ran cold and fast, stands of pine and fir that filled the air with their sharp, clean scent. The road grew rougher, less maintained. In places it disappeared entirely, and they had to pick their way across bare rock or through dense undergrowth. Aaron's legs trembled with exhaustion, and he had to stop frequently to catch his breath. We're climbing, Kale explained during one of these stops. The elevation is increasing. Your body needs time to adjust. How much higher are we going? Stowheart sits at the base of the highest peaks. We have several thousand feet yet to climb. Aaron wanted to cry. Instead, he forced himself to keep walking. Around midday, they encountered other travelers on the road, a merchant caravan. Heading south, away from the mountains. The wagons were loaded with furs and metalwork, and the merchants looked prosperous and well-armed. Kale steered them into the trees before the caravan came into view, and they waited in silence as the wagons rumbled past. Why do we always hide? Aaron asked when the caravan was gone. Those were just merchants. Merchants talk, Kale replied. They trade in information as much as goods. The fewer people who see us, the fewer who can describe us to Valor's hunters. They continued on, and the afternoon stretched into evening. Aaron's exhaustion deepened with every step. His vision began to blur at the edges, and he found himself stumbling over roots and rocks he should have seen. His pack felt like it was filled with stones, and his shoulders burned where the straps cut into his flesh. When Kale finally called a halt for the night, Aaron collapsed where he stood. He couldn't even muster the energy to help set up camp. He just lay there, breathing hard, feeling his heart hammer in his chest. Drink, Kale said, pressing a water skin into his hands. You're dehydrated. Aaron drank deeply, the water cool and sweet. Slowly, his breathing steadied, and the world stopped spinning. He sat up and looked around. They'd camped in a small clearing surrounded by pine trees. The ground was carpeted with needles, soft and fragrant. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted quietly. Another week of this. I don't know if I have it in me. You do, Kale said with certainty. Your body is adapting. Tomorrow will be easier than today. And the day after will be easier still. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Pain is temporary. Weakness is temporary. But giving up is permanent. Aaron wanted to argue, but he was too tired. He ate the food Kale prepared, more dried meat, some hard cheese, a handful of nuts, and then lay down by the fire. Sleep claimed him almost immediately, deep and dreamless. The third day began with rain. Aaron woke to the sound of water pattering on leaves and the feel of cold drops on his face. The fire had gone out during the night, and everything was damp and miserable. His clothes clung to him, and his blanket was soaked through. "We need to keep moving," Kale said, already packed and ready. "The rain will slow us down, but we can't afford to wait it out." They set out into the gray morning, and within an hour, Aaron was soaked to the skin. The rain wasn't heavy, but it was persistent, a steady drizzle that found its way through every gap in his clothing. His boots squelched with every step, and water ran down his neck in cold rivulets. The road had turned to mud, making every step treacherous. Aaron slipped repeatedly, catching himself on rocks or trees, his hands getting scraped and dirty. His pack seemed to weigh even more now that it was waterlogged, and his shoulders screamed in protest. But despite the misery, Kale had been right about one thing: his body was adapting. His legs still ached, but the pain was duller now, more manageable. His breathing came easier, even on the steep climbs. He was getting stronger, tougher, whether he wanted to or not. Around midday, the rain finally stopped, and weak sunlight broke through the clouds. They crested a ridge and saw something that made Kale pause. Below them, in a small valley, a wagon had broken down in the middle of the road. One of its wheels had shattered completely, the spokes scattered across the mud. A family stood beside it, a man in his 30s with a weathered face, a woman holding an infant, and two young children, a boy and a girl, who couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old. They looked distressed, the man kneeling by the broken wheel with his head in his hands. "We should help them," Aaron said immediately. "We should keep moving," Kale replied, his voice flat. "But they're stranded." And those children, Aaron gestured toward the little ones, who were huddled against their mother, looking cold and frightened, "are not our concern." Aaron stopped walking and turned to face Kale. "How can you say that? They need help. We can't just leave them here." "Yes, we can. And we should." Kale's expression was hard, unyielding. "Every moment we delay, every person we interact with, increases the risk of being discovered. That family is not our responsibility." "They're people," Aaron said, his voice rising. "They're stuck in the middle of nowhere with young children. What if it rains again? What if night falls before they can fix their wagon? Those children could freeze. Then their parents should have been more careful with their equipment." The callousness of the statement shocked Aaron. He stared at Kale, seeing the ancient being beneath the human facade, something that had lived so long that individual human lives had lost their significance. Something that could watch a family suffer and feel nothing. "I'm going to help them," Aaron said firmly. "You can come with me or not. But I'm not walking past people who need help." For a long moment, Kale said nothing. His eyes were unreadable, his expression carved from stone. Then he sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "You're making a mistake. Maybe. But I'm still going to do it." "Fine. But make it quick. And let me do the talking." They descended into the valley and approached the family. The man looked up as they drew near, hope flickering across his face. "Thank the gods. Can you help us? Our wheel broke, and we're stuck. We've been here for hours." Aaron examined the wheel and saw immediately that the problem was worse than it appeared. Not only had the wheel shattered, but the axle had cracked as well, a long split running through the wood. "This is going to need more than just a new wheel," he said. "The whole axle needs to be replaced or repaired." "We don't have a spare axle," the man said, his voice breaking with despair. "And the nearest town is a day's walk from here. Maybe more. I can't leave my family alone on the road, and my wife can't walk that far with the baby." The woman looked at them with desperate eyes. "Please, if you have any way to help us. We have a little money." "Not much, but keep your money," Aaron said. He looked at Kale. "Can you do anything?" Kale's jaw tightened. I'm not a carpenter, but you can do other things. I've seen you do them. The family looked between them confused. Kale stared at Aaron for a long moment, and Aaron could see the internal struggle playing out behind his eyes. Finally, with obvious reluctance, he approached the wagon. "Stand back," he said to the family. They obeyed, the man gathering his children close. Kale knelt beside the broken axle and placed both hands on the wood. He closed his eyes, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then Aaron felt it, a subtle shift in the air, a sense of power moving, like heat rising from sun-warmed stone. The wood of the axle began to change. The crack sealed itself, the split edges knitting back together as if they'd never been separated. The grain of the wood flowed and merged, becoming whole again. In less than a minute, the axle was completely repaired, looking as solid as the day it had been made. The family stared in amazement. The woman clutched her baby tighter, her eyes wide. The children pressed against their father's legs, frightened and awed in equal measure. "You're a mage," the man breathed, his voice filled with wonder and a touch of fear. "We're travelers," Kale said curtly, standing up. His face was carefully neutral, but Aaron could see the tension in his shoulders. "And we need to keep moving. Fix your wheel and be on your way. Head south. Don't linger in these mountains." "Thank you," the man said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. How can we repay you?" "We don't have much, but you can't repay us," Kale said. "Just remember what I said. Go south. These mountains aren't safe." "Why? What's happening?" But Kale was already walking away, and Aaron hurried to follow. Behind them, he heard the woman calling out thanks, heard the children's excited voices asking their father about the magic they'd witnessed. When they were out of earshot, climbing back up the ridge, Aaron said, "That was kind of you." "It was foolish," Kale replied, his voice tight with anger, though whether the anger was directed at Aaron or himself, it was hard to tell. "Now they'll remember us. They'll talk about the mage who fixed their wagon with a touch. And if Valor's hunters question them, and they will, eventually, they'll have a description. They'll know we passed this way. They'll know which direction we were heading." The words hit Aaron like cold water. He hadn't thought about that. He'd just wanted to help, to do something good in a world that seemed filled with darkness and cruelty. But Kale was right, every action had consequences. "But we helped them," Aaron said weakly. "Those children will tell everyone they meet about the mysterious mage who fixed their father's wagon. The story will spread. It will reach the wrong ears. And when Valor's hunters come asking questions, that family will tell them everything they know." Kale stopped walking and turned to face Aaron. "Do you understand what you've done? You've created a trail. A signpost pointing directly at us. I didn't mean intent doesn't matter. Only consequences matter. You wanted to help, and I understand that impulse. But in this world, Aaron, kindness can be a weapon used against you. Valor will use it. He'll find that family. He'll question them. And if they can't or won't tell him what he wants to know." Kale's voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. Aaron felt sick. "You think he'll hurt them?" "I think Valor will do whatever serves his purpose. If hurting them gets him information, yes. If making an example of them sends a message to others who might help you, yes. That's who he is. That's what you're up against." They walked in silence for the rest of the afternoon, Aaron's mind churning with guilt and doubt. He kept seeing the children's faces, their innocent wonder at the magic they'd witnessed. Had he just signed their death warrant? Had his desire to help actually put them in more danger? The weight of it pressed down on him, heavier than his pack, heavier than his exhaustion. Every choice he made seemed to have terrible consequences. Every person he encountered was put at risk simply by being near him. How was he supposed to live like this? How was he supposed to make decisions when every option led to suffering? As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, they made camp in a small grove of pine trees. Kale built a fire in silence, and they ate without speaking. The tension between them was palpable, a wall that neither seemed willing or able to breach. Finally, as darkness fell and the stars began to appear overhead, Kale spoke. "You have a good heart, Aaron. That's not a bad thing. In fact, it's one of your greatest strengths. But in this world, in the situation you're in, kindness can be a weakness. Valor will use it against you if he can. He'll hurt the people you care about, the people you try to help, because he knows it will hurt you. So I should just ignore people who need help? Aaron asked, his voice hollow. I should just walk past suffering and do nothing? No, but you should be aware of the cost. Every action has consequences. Every choice you make affects not just you, but everyone around you. The family we helped today, they're in danger now because of us. Because of you. That's the reality you have to live with. How do you live with it? Aaron asked. How do you make choices when every option leads to pain? Cale was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost sad. You do the best you can. You weigh the options and choose the path that causes the least harm. And then you live with the consequences, whatever they may be. That's all anyone can do. It's not enough. No, it never is. But it's all we have. Aaron lay down by the fire, but sleep was a long time coming. He kept thinking about the family, about the children, about all the people who had suffered because of him. Mardad. The logging camp. The townspeople of Millbrook. The family with the broken wagon. How many more would there be before this was over? And what right did he have to put others at risk? What made his life, his survival, worth the suffering of innocence? He didn't have an answer. And that terrified him more than anything else. The next morning, they continued north. The mountains were closer now, looming large on the horizon, their peaks sharp and white against the blue sky. The air was noticeably thinner, colder, and Aaron found himself breathing harder even on level ground. The landscape had changed dramatically. Gone were the gentle hills and farmland of the lowlands. Here, the terrain was harsh and unforgiving, rocky slopes covered in scrub brush, deep ravines where streams ran fast and cold, stands of pine and fir that grew twisted and gnarled by the constant wind. They saw fewer travelers now. The road, such as it was, had dwindled to little more than a goat path, winding between boulders and along cliff edges that made Aaron's stomach clench with vertigo. Once, they spotted a group of riders in the distance, moving parallel to their path. Cale immediately led them into cover, and they waited in tense silence until the riders passed. Scouts, Cale said quietly. Could be from Stoneheart. Could be hunters. Either way, best not to be seen. As they traveled, Cale began to tell Aaron more about Stoneheart Guild and what to expect when they arrived. The guild is divided into factions, he explained as they walked. The warriors, who focus on combat and physical strength. The smiths, who work metal and stone with both craft and magic. The wardens, who guard the guild's borders and maintain order. And the council, who govern. Which faction does Magistrate Kara belong to? She rose through the warriors, but she's council now. She's respected, but not universally loved. Some think she's too cautious, too willing to compromise. Others think she's not cautious enough, that she takes too many risks. And Master Torvin? Torvin is complicated. He was once a great warrior, a commander of the guild's forces. But he lost people under his command, including his own daughter. He retired from active service and now trains the next generation. Some see him as a hero. Others see him as a failure who couldn't protect his own. What do you see him as? Cale was quiet for a moment. I see him as a man carrying a burden he'll never be able to put down. Much like you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Aaron thought about the family with the broken wagon, about all the people who had suffered because of him. Yes, he understood burden. He understood it all too well. Around midday, they crested a ridge and Cale stopped abruptly, his body going tense. What is it? Aaron asked, coming up beside him. Smoke, Cale said, pointing. A lot of it. Coming from the direction of the next town. Aaron looked where Cale was pointing and saw it, thick, black columns of smoke rising into the clear sky, staining the blue with darkness. His stomach clenched with dread. We need to see what happened, he said. We need to be careful, Cale replied. If it's what I think it is. They hurried forward, moving as quickly as the terrain allowed. As they descended the ridge, the smoke became more visible, not just one column, but many, rising from multiple sources. And beneath the smoke, Aaron could see the orange glow of flames. The town was burning. They approached cautiously, using the cover of trees and rocks to stay hidden. As they drew closer, the full extent of the devastation became clear. Buildings were ablaze, their roofs collapsed, their walls blackened with soot. Bodies lay in the streets, men, women, even children. The few survivors wandered in a daze, their faces blank with shock, their clothes torn and bloody. The smell hit Aaron like a physical blow, smoke and burning wood, but underneath that, the sickly sweet stench of burning flesh. He gagged, pressing his hand over his mouth and nose, fighting the urge to vomit. "What happened here?" he whispered, horrified. "Valor's hunters," Cale said grimly, his eyes scanning the destruction. "They were looking for you. When they didn't find you, they did this. But these people had nothing to do with me." Aaron's voice cracked with anguish. "They didn't even know I existed. Valor doesn't care. He's sending a message. Cooperate, or this is what happens. Help the Emberborn and your town burns. Your family dies. Your life ends." Cale's voice was flat, emotionless, but Aaron could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands had curled into fists. Aaron felt sick. All these people, dead or displaced, because of him. Because he existed. Because Valor wanted him dead and was willing to burn the world to make it happen. A woman stumbled past them, her dress torn and bloody, her eyes vacant. She was muttering something under her breath, the same words over and over. "They're gone. They're all gone. They're gone." A child sat in the middle of the street, no more than 7 or 8 years old, crying silently beside the body of what might have been his mother. His face was streaked with soot and tears, and he rocked back and forth, as if the motion could somehow undo what had happened. "We need to help them," Aaron said, his voice breaking. "We can't just, there's nothing we can do," Cale replied. "The damage is done. The dead are dead. And if we stay here, if we're seen, more people will die. The hunters might still be in the area. If they find us here. So we just leave? We just walk away and let them suffer." "Yes." Cale's voice was hard, unyielding. "Because staying helps no one. Because your presence here would only make things worse. Because the best thing you can do for these people is to keep moving, to get to Stoneheart, to become strong enough to stop Valor before he can do this again." Aaron stared at the burning town, at the bodies in the streets, at the survivors who looked like they wished they were dead too. The weight of it crushed down on him, suffocating in its enormity. This was his fault. Not directly, but the chain of causation led back to him. If he didn't exist, these people would still be alive. Their homes would still be standing. Their children would still have parents. "I can't," he whispered. "I can't just walk away. I can't, you can. And you will." Cale's hand closed on his shoulder, firm and unyielding. "Because you're the last Emberborn. Because you're the only one who can stop this from happening again. Because if you die here, if you're captured here, then all of this," he gestured at the burning town, "all of this suffering will have been for nothing." Aaron wanted to argue, wanted to scream, wanted to run into the town and help the survivors, to do something, anything, to make this right. But he knew Cale was correct. His presence would only bring more death, more suffering, more destruction. So he turned away from the burning town, from the bodies and the survivors and the child, crying beside his dead mother. He turned away and started walking north, toward the mountains, toward Stoneheart, toward a future he couldn't see and wasn't sure he wanted. Behind him, the smoke rose into the sky, a black stain against the blue. A monument to the cost of his existence. A reminder of what was at stake. And with every step he took away from that town, the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. The town Aaron never learned its name lay in ruins before them. What had once been a thriving settlement of perhaps 200 souls was now a graveyard of charred timber and collapsed stone. Buildings burned with hungry flames that consumed everything they touched, their roofs caved in, their walls blackened with soot and streaked with ash. The acrid smell of smoke mixed with something worse, the sickly sweet stench of burning flesh that made Aaron's stomach heave. Bodies lay in the streets. Men, women, children, the hunters had made no distinction. Some had been cut down as they fled, their backs bearing the marks of sword and arrow. Others had been trapped in burning buildings, their final moments unimaginable. The few survivors wandered through the destruction in a daze, their faces blank with shock, their eyes seeing nothing, their mouths moving soundlessly as if they'd forgotten how to form words. "What happened here?" Aaron whispered, his voice breaking. His hands trembled at his sides, and he felt the heat building in his palms, not the controlled warmth of his training, but the wild, desperate fire of rage and grief. "Valor's hunters," Cale said grimly, his eyes scanning the devastation with an expression that might have been sorrow or might have been something older and colder. "They were looking for you. When they didn't find you, they did this. But these people had nothing to do with me." Aaron's voice rose, cracking with anguish. "They didn't even know I existed. Valor doesn't care. He's sending a message. Cooperate, or this is what happens. Help the Emberborn and your town burns. Your family dies. Your life ends." Cale's voice was flat, emotionless, but Aaron could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands had curled into fists. This is what he does. This is who he is. Aaron felt sick. All these people, dead or displaced, because of him. Because he existed. Because Valor wanted him dead and was willing to burn the world to make it happen. The weight of it crushed down on him, suffocating in its enormity. A woman stumbled past them, her dress torn and bloody, her hair singed, her eyes vacant. She was muttering something under her breath, the same words over and over. "They're gone. They're all gone. They're gone." A child sat in the middle of the street, no more than 7 or 8 years old, crying silently beside the body of what might have been his mother. His face was streaked with soot and tears, and he rocked back and forth, as if the motion could somehow undo what had happened. An old man knelt in front of what had been his home, now just a pile of smoking rubble. He was digging through the debris with his bare hands, his fingers bleeding, searching for something or someone he would never find. "We need to help them," Aaron said, his voice stronger now, cutting through the shock and grief. "We can't just stand here. We have to do something." "There's nothing we can do," Cale replied, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "The damage is done. The dead are dead. And if we stay here, if we're seen, more people will die. The hunters might still be in the area. If they find us here. So we just leave? We just walk away and let them suffer." Aaron turned to face Cale, and there was fire in his eyes, not magic, but something deeper, something that came from the core of who he was. "You helped that family with the broken wagon. You fixed their axle even though it put us at risk. Why won't you help these people? That was different. It's not different." Aaron's hands were glowing now, faint embers dancing across his palms. "These are people who need help. People who are suffering. And I'm not walking away. Not this time." Cale stared at him for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression, surprise. Perhaps, or respect, or recognition of something he'd been waiting to see. "You're making a mistake. Maybe, but I'm still going to do it." Aaron's voice was steady now, certain. "You can go if you want. But I'm staying. At least until I've done what I can. Aaron." "I mean it, Cale. I'm not leaving these people. Not when I can help. Not when this is my fault." For a long moment, Cale said nothing. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Fine. But we work quickly, and we leave before nightfall. The hunters could return at any moment." "Agreed." "Agreed." They moved through the town, and Aaron felt purpose replacing despair. He approached a building where flames still licked at the wooden frame, threatening to spread to the structures nearby. An elderly couple stood watching helplessly as their home burned, too old and frail to fight the fire themselves. Aaron closed his eyes and reached for the fire inside him, not to create flame, but to control it. He remembered his mother's words from his dreams. "Fire is not your enemy. It is part of you. You must learn to speak to it, to work with it, to respect it." He extended his hands toward the burning building and pulled. The flames responded, bending toward him, drawn by his will. He shaped them, compressed them, drew the heat into himself until the fire was nothing but embers, then ash, then smoke. The building was damaged but no longer burning. The elderly couple stared at him in wonder and fear. "You're a mage," the old man breathed. "I'm someone who can help," Aaron replied. "Are you hurt? Do you need anything?" "Our granddaughter," the woman said, her voice breaking. "She was inside when the hunters came. We couldn't reach her." "We couldn't," Aaron moved before she could finish, running into the smoking building. The interior was dark and filled with ash, the air thick and choking. He called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" A weak cough answered him from the back room. He found her there, a girl of perhaps 10, trapped beneath a fallen beam. She was conscious, but barely, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "It's going to be okay," Aaron said, kneeling beside her. "I'm going to get you out." He tried to lift the beam, but it was too heavy, pinning her legs. He couldn't move it alone. "Kale," he shouted. "I need help." Kale appeared in the doorway, assessed the situation in an instant, and moved to the beam. He lifted it as if it weighed nothing, his supernatural strength on full display. Aaron pulled the girl free, checking her for injuries. Her legs were bruised, but not broken. She would survive. He carried her outside, where her grandparents wept with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," the old woman said, clutching Aaron's hand. "Thank you. You saved her life." "I'm just glad I could help," Aaron said. But the words felt hollow. He'd saved one child, but how many others had died? How many families had been destroyed because of him? They moved through the town, helping where they could. Kale used his strength to move debris, to free people trapped in collapsed buildings, to clear paths through the rubble. Aaron used his fire magic to extinguish smaller blazes, carefully controlling the flames so they didn't spread. It wasn't much, but it was something. As they worked, Aaron spoke with the survivors, gathering their stories. An innkeeper told him how the hunters had arrived at dawn, demanding to know if anyone had seen a young man with fire magic. When the townspeople said no, the hunters had begun burning buildings one by one until someone gave them information. "But we didn't know anything," the innkeeper said, his voice raw with grief and anger. "We'd never seen you before. We couldn't tell them what we didn't know." A blacksmith described how the hunters had rounded up the town's leaders and executed them in the square as an example. "They said this is what happens to towns that harbor enemies of the guilds," he said bitterly. "They said anyone who helps the Emberborn heir will suffer the same fate." A young mother clutching her infant told Aaron how she'd hidden in a cellar while the hunters searched her home. "They were looking for you," she said, her eyes wide with fear. "They described you, your age, your appearance, your fire magic. They said you were dangerous, that you needed to be captured or killed." Each story added to the weight on Aaron's shoulders. Each testimony confirmed what he already knew: this destruction was because of him. These people had died because Valor wanted him dead. The guilt was overwhelming, crushing, suffocating. But beneath the guilt, something else was growing: anger. A cold, hard fury at Valor's cruelty, at his willingness to slaughter innocents to achieve his goals. These people had done nothing wrong. They had committed no crime. They had simply existed in a place where Aaron might have passed through. And for that, Valor had burned their town to the ground. "This has to stop," Aaron thought, his hands clenching into fists. "I have to stop him. Whatever it takes." As the afternoon wore on, Aaron noticed a young woman watching them from the edge of the town square. She was perhaps a few years older than him, with long dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and eyes that seemed to see everything. She wore traveling clothes, sturdy leather armor over a simple tunic and trousers, and had a sword at her hip. Unlike the other survivors, she didn't look shocked or dazed. She looked alert, focused, calculating. When their eyes met, she approached with confident strides. "You're mages," she said. It wasn't a question. "We're travelers," Kale said, his tone warning her not to press. His body had shifted subtly into a defensive stance, ready to move if she proved to be a threat. Travelers who can control fire and move stone like it weighs nothing. She looked directly at Aaron, and there was recognition in her eyes. You're the one they're looking for, aren't you? The Emberborn heir. Aaron's blood ran cold. His hand moved instinctively toward the heat building in his palms, ready to defend himself if necessary. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Her voice was calm, matter of fact. I've been searching for you for months. Ever since I heard rumors that someone had survived the fall of the Emberborn Guild. I've been following reports of fire magic sightings, tracking the movements of Valor's hunters. Piecing together where you might be. Who are you? Kale demanded, stepping between her and Aaron. His hand moved to his side as if reaching for a weapon, though Aaron had never seen him carry one. And why should we believe anything you say? My name is Lyra, the woman said, meeting Kale's gaze without flinching. And I'm not your enemy. I'm here to help. Why would you want to help us? Aaron asked, stepping around Kale to face her directly. There was something about her, a determination, a fire in her eyes, that reminded him of the woman from his dreams. His mother. Because Valor destroyed my family too, Lyra said, and for the first time, emotion cracked through her calm exterior. Her voice hardened, her jaw tightened, and her eyes blazed with barely contained fury. My parents were mages in a small guild, the Crimson Dawn. It wasn't one of the great guilds, but it was ours. We had maybe 50 members, mostly families who'd lived there for generations. When Valor began his campaign to consolidate power, he demanded that every guild swear loyalty to him or be destroyed. She paused, her hands clenching into fists. My parents refused. They said the guilds were meant to be independent, that no single person should have dominion over all magical power. So Valor sent his hunters. They came at night, just like they did here. They burned everything, killed everyone. I was 12 years old. I survived only because my mother hid me in a secret chamber beneath our home and told me not to come out no matter what I heard. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I heard everything. The screaming, the fire, my mother calling my name, begging me to stay hidden. And I did. I stayed hidden while my family died, while my guild burned, while Valor's hunters laughed and celebrated their victory. Aaron felt tears stinging his eyes. Her story was too familiar, too close to his own. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I know what it's like to lose everything. I know you do, Lyra said, her eyes meeting his. That's why I've been searching for you. You're the last of the Emberborn, the most powerful fire mages in history. If anyone can stand against Valor, it's you. If anyone can stop him from destroying more families, more guilds, it's you. And you think helping me will give you that chance? Aaron asked. A chance to strike back at him? I think you're the only hope we have, Lyra said simply. Valor has been consolidating power for years. He controls multiple guilds now, either through loyalty or fear. The independent guilds are being destroyed one by one. If someone doesn't stop him, there won't be any guilds left. Just Valor and his empire of ashes. Kale stepped forward, his expression hard. We don't need your help. And we certainly don't need someone who's motivated by revenge. Revenge makes people reckless. It makes them take unnecessary risks. You're traveling to Stoneheart, aren't you? Lyra said, ignoring his objection. Hoping they'll train him, give him sanctuary. But you don't know the current political situation there. I do. I've been there. I spent 2 years training with their warriors after my guild fell. I know who you can trust and who you can't. I know which council members are sympathetic to Valor and which ones would support an Emberborn heir. And why should we trust you? Kale asked, his voice cold. You appear out of nowhere, claiming to have been searching for us, claiming to want to help. How do we know you're not working for Valor? How do we know this isn't a trap? You don't, Lyra said calmly. But think about it logically. If I were working for Valor, I would have already signaled his hunters. This town is crawling with his people, or it was before they moved on. I could have turned you in a dozen times over. Instead, I'm offering you information you need. And I'm offering you my skills as a fighter and mage. You're going to need all the help you can get. Aaron looked at Kale, then back at Lyra. There was something about her, a determination, a strength, a refusal to give up despite everything she'd lost, that resonated with him. She'd survived when her guild fell. She'd trained herself, prepared herself, waited for a chance to fight back. Just like he was doing. "I think we should trust her," he said. Aaron, Kale's voice carried a warning. "I know it's a risk. But she's right. We need help. We need information. And if she's been searching for me, if she knows about the Emberborn, if she understands what we're up against." He turned to face Kale fully. "You've been telling me I need to make my own decisions. That I need to become the person my parents believed I could be. Well, this is my decision. I want her to come with us." Kale was silent for a long moment, his eyes searching Aaron's face. Then he sighed, a sound of profound weariness. "Fine. But if you betray us, if you put him in danger, you won't live to regret it. I've kept this bloodline safe for longer than you can imagine, and I won't let anyone, not Valor, not his hunters, not you, threaten that." "Understood," Lyra said. She looked at Aaron and smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her face, making her look younger, less hardened by loss. "It's good to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about the Emberborn. My parents used to tell me stories about them when I was young. They said the Emberborn were the guardians of balance, the ones who kept the other guilds honest." "I wish I could say the same," Aaron replied. "I don't remember anything about them. Not really. Just fragments. Dreams. Pieces of a past I can't quite reach." "Then I'll help you remember," Lyra said. "But first, we need to get out of this town. The hunters could return at any moment. And when they do, they'll be looking for anyone who helped the survivors. Anyone who used magic to fight their fires or move their debris." Aaron looked around at the destruction, at the people they'd helped, at the bodies still lying in the streets. "We can't just leave them like this." "We have to," Kale said, his voice gentler now. "We've done what we can. We've saved lives. But if we stay longer, we put everyone at risk, including the people we've helped." Aaron knew he was right, but it didn't make leaving any easier. They gathered what supplies they could from the ruins, food, water, blankets that hadn't been burned, and distributed them among the survivors. Aaron spoke with the innkeeper one last time. "Where will you go?" he asked. "South," the innkeeper said. "Away from the mountains. Away from the guilds and their wars. We'll find a new place to start over. We always do." "I'm sorry," Aaron said. "I'm sorry this happened to you. I'm sorry I couldn't stop it." "You didn't do this, boy," the innkeeper said, placing a hand on Aaron's shoulder. "Valor did. His hunters did. Don't carry their guilt. Just make sure you stop them from doing it again." As they left the town, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Aaron too much of fire. Behind them, the smoke still rose into the darkening sky, a black stain against the sunset. A monument to the cost of his existence. A reminder of what was at stake. They walked in silence for the first hour, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, as full darkness fell and they made camp in a small grove of trees, Aaron found himself walking beside Lyra while Kale scouted ahead. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for wanting to help. For searching for me." "Don't thank me yet," Lyra replied. "The road ahead is going to be dangerous. Valor won't stop hunting you. And when he finds you, and he will find you eventually, he'll do everything in his power to kill you." "I know. Do you? Because I don't think you understand what you're up against." She glanced ahead. At Kale's silhouette moving through the trees. "Valor isn't just a powerful mage. He's something else. Something older and more dangerous than any human." "What do you mean?" Lyra was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "There are stories. Legends. Things the old mages used to whisper about when they thought no one was listening. They say Valor has lived for centuries. That he's seen empires rise and fall. That he's not bound by the same limitations as human mages." "You think he's not human?" "I think there's more to him than anyone admits. Just like there's more to your friend." She nodded toward Kale. "He's not human either, is he?" Aaron hesitated. "He says he's bound by oaths not to reveal certain things." "Not yet. That's convenient, Lyra said dryly. But I've seen the way he moves. The way he doesn't tire. The way he lifted that beam like it was made of straw. Whatever he is, he's not like us. Does it matter? It might. If we're going to fight Valor, we need to understand what we're fighting. And we need to understand who our allies really are. She looked at Aaron directly. I'm not saying don't trust him. I'm saying keep your eyes open. Ask questions. Demand answers. Because secrets have a way of getting people killed. Aaron thought about that as they continued walking. Lyra was right, there were too many secrets, too many unanswered questions. Kale's true nature. Valor's origins. His own past and the full extent of his powers. The more he learned, the more he realized how little he actually knew. But one thing was certain, the time for secrets was running out. Soon, he would need answers. Soon, he would need to understand exactly what he was up against. And soon, he would need to decide what kind of person he wanted to be, someone who ran from the truth, or someone who faced it head-on, no matter the cost. When they made camp that night, Kale built a fire. They were far enough from the burned town that the risk was acceptable, and they sat around it, eating a simple meal of dried meat and hard bread. The silence was heavy, weighted with everything they'd seen and done. Finally, Lyra spoke. Tomorrow, we need to talk about Stoneheart. About what to expect when we arrive. About who we can trust and who we can't. Agreed, Kale said. But tonight, we rest. We've all earned it. Aaron lay down by the fire, but sleep was a long time coming. He kept seeing the faces of the survivors, hearing their stories, feeling the weight of their suffering. He kept thinking about the child crying beside his mother's body, about the old man digging through rubble with bleeding hands, about the woman muttering that everyone was gone. This was what Valor did. This was the cost of his ambition. And Aaron was the only one who could stop it. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on him, heavy and inescapable. But beneath the weight, something else was growing: determination. Purpose. A fire that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with who he was choosing to become. He would stop Valor. He would learn to control his power. He would become the Emberborn his parents had believed he could be. And he would make sure that no more towns burned. No more families were destroyed. No more children cried beside their dead mothers. Whatever it took. Whatever the cost. That was his oath. His promise. His purpose. And as he finally drifted off to sleep, the last thing he saw was Lyra sitting by the fire, keeping watch, her eyes reflecting the flames, a warrior who had lost everything but refused to give up. Just like him. The sun was setting as they found a suitable place to camp, a small grove of pine trees nestled in a shallow valley, far from any road or settlement. The location offered natural concealment, with dense undergrowth screening them from casual observation, and a small stream provided fresh water. Kale had chosen it with his usual careful assessment, his eyes scanning the terrain for threats before he'd even dismounted from the path. Here, he said simply, dropping his pack near a ring of stones that suggested others had camped here before. We're far enough from the burned town that a fire should be safe. Aaron gratefully shed his own pack, his shoulders aching from the weight. The day's travel had been long and emotionally exhausting, the images of the destroyed town still fresh in his mind. He moved mechanically, gathering fallen branches for firewood while Kale cleared the old fire pit and Lyra scouted the perimeter. The routine of making camp was oddly comforting. There was something grounding about the simple tasks: collecting wood, arranging stones, preparing a space to sleep. It gave his hands something to do while his mind processed everything he'd seen and learned. Lyra returned from her circuit of the grove, moving with the silent grace of someone trained in stealth. We're alone, she reported. No signs of recent passage, no tracks except deer and smaller game. If anyone's following us, they're at least a day behind. Good, Kale said, striking flint to steel. Sparks caught in the tinder, and within moments, a small fire crackled to life. The flames cast dancing shadows across the grove, and Aaron found himself staring into them, remembering his mother's words about fire being alive, about learning to speak to it. They sat around the fire in a rough triangle, each claiming a spot on the moss-covered ground. Kale distributed their evening meal, dried meat, hard bread, and a handful of nuts from their supplies. It was simple fare, but after the day's exertion, Aaron ate gratefully. For a while, they ate in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The fire crackled and popped, sending occasional sparks spiraling up into the darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, an owl hooted and the stream burbled over smooth stones. The sounds of the forest at night, peaceful, natural, a stark contrast to the horror they'd witnessed earlier. Aaron watched Lyra across the fire, studying her in the flickering light. She sat with her back straight, her posture alert even in rest, one hand never far from the sword at her hip. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid during the day's travel, and strands of it caught the firelight, gleaming like polished wood. There was a hardness to her features, the set of her jaw, the intensity in her eyes, but also a beauty that made something in Aaron's chest tighten. She caught him looking and raised an eyebrow. "Something on your mind?" Aaron felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the fire. "Just thinking about everything that happened today." It was a lot to process, she agreed, her expression softening slightly. "The first time you see what Valor's capable of, it changes you. Makes you understand what we're really fighting against. Have you seen it before?" "Towns like that one." "Twice," Lyra said, her voice going flat. "Once when I was younger, before I knew what was happening. The second time." She paused, staring into the fire. "The second time, I was old enough to understand. Old enough to know that someone needed to stop him." Aaron wanted to ask more, to understand what had driven her to search for him, but something in her expression warned him not to press. Instead, he turned his attention to Kale, who sat slightly apart from them, his eyes distant, his expression unreadable. Lyra had been watching Kale too, Aaron realized. She'd been studying him throughout the meal with the same careful attention she'd given the perimeter of their camp. Now, as the silence stretched, she spoke. "You're not human, are you?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Kale's expression didn't change, but Aaron saw something flicker in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, or resignation. "What makes you say that?" "The way you move," Lyra said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. "I've been watching you since we left the town. You don't move like a human. There's no wasted motion, no hesitation, no fatigue. You've been walking all day, carrying a pack, and you're not even breathing hard. Your posture hasn't changed since this morning. Perhaps I'm simply well-trained." "I've trained with the best warriors in 3 guilds," Lyra countered. "None of them moved like you. And then there's what you did to that wagon axle. You touched it, and the wood healed itself. That's not fire magic. That's not earth magic. That's something else entirely." Kale was silent, his eyes reflecting the firelight in a way that made them seem to glow. Aaron found himself holding his breath, waiting for the answer. He'd wondered about Kale's nature since the moment they'd met, had seen hints of something beyond human in the way he fought, the way he seemed to know things he shouldn't know. But Kale had always deflected his questions, always promised answers when the time is right. "And the way you don't need food," Lyra continued, pressing her advantage. "You eat, but I've noticed you don't actually consume much. You take a few bites, move the food around, but you're not really eating. You're going through the motions to appear human. You're very observant," Kale said quietly. "It's kept me alive this long." Lyra leaned forward, her eyes intense. "So I'll ask again, what are you? Because if we're going to travel together, if I'm going to help protect Aaron, I need to know what I'm dealing with." Aaron looked at Kale, hoping for an answer, hoping that this time he would finally explain. But Kale's expression remained closed, guarded. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "I am bound by oaths not to reveal certain things. Not yet. When the time is right, you'll know everything. But that time is not now." "That's not good enough," Lyra said, her voice hardening. "If we're going to travel together, we need to trust each other. And I can't trust someone who won't tell me what they are. For all I know, you could be working for Valor. You could be leading us into a trap." "If I were working for Valor, Aaron would already be dead or captured," Kale replied, his tone still calm but with an edge of steel beneath it. "I've had countless opportunities to betray him. I haven't." "That should tell you something about my intentions." "It tells me you're patient," Lyra shot back. "It tells me you're playing a long game. But it doesn't tell me what you are or why you're really helping him." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Aaron could see Lyra's hand had moved closer to her sword, not quite touching it but ready. Cale remained perfectly still, but there was something coiled about his posture now, like a spring compressed and waiting to release. "Lyra," Aaron said, trying to defuse the situation. "Cale has saved my life multiple times. He's protected me, taught me, guided me. Whatever he is, he's not my enemy." "You don't know that," Lyra said, not taking her eyes off Cale. "You've known him for what, a few weeks? You don't know his true nature, his real motivations. You're trusting him because you have no other choice, but that doesn't mean he's trustworthy." "Then don't travel with us," Cale said flatly. "The choice is yours. You can leave now, go your own way, and we'll continue to Stoneheart without you. Or you can accept that there are things I cannot yet reveal and trust that when the time comes, you'll understand why I kept them secret." Lyra's hand moved to her sword hilt, and for a moment, Aaron thought she might actually draw it. The firelight played across her face, highlighting the tension in her jaw, the determination in her eyes. Then, slowly, she relaxed, shaking her head. "Fine," she said, her voice tight with frustration. "Keep your secrets. But know this, if you put Aaron in danger because of what you're hiding, if your secrets get him killed, I'll make you regret it. Whatever you are, whatever power you have, I'll find a way to make you pay." "Noted," Cale said, and there was something almost like respect in his voice. The tension didn't fully dissipate, but it eased slightly. Aaron let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. The confrontation had shaken him, not because he feared violence between his companions, but because Lyra had voiced doubts he'd been trying to suppress. What if Cale was hiding something dangerous? What if his secrets put them all at risk? But then he remembered Cale's face when he'd spoken about Aaron's parents, the genuine sorrow in his eyes. He remembered the way Cale had protected him, had taught him, had shown him patience and care. Whatever Cale was hiding, Aaron couldn't believe it was malicious. "Lyra," Aaron said, trying to change the subject and ease the atmosphere. "You said you've been to Stoneheart. What's it like? What should I expect?" Lyra turned her attention to him, and her expression softened slightly, the hardness fading from her eyes. "It's impressive," she said after a moment. "The entire guild is carved into a mountain, halls and chambers and training grounds, all made from living rock. The earth mages there are masters of their craft. They can shape stone like clay, can sense or deposits deep underground, can make the earth itself move at their command." "It sounds incredible," Aaron said, genuinely awed by the description. "It is. But it's also dangerous." Lyra paused, choosing her words carefully. "Stoneheart has its own internal politics. There are factions that support Valor or at least don't oppose him. There are others who see him as a threat but are too cautious to act. And there are those who would use your status as the last Emberborn for their own purposes." "How do you know all this?" Aaron asked. "I spent 6 months there, training," Lyra explained. "I wanted to learn earth magic to complement my fire magic. The combination makes me more versatile in combat." She held out her hand, palm up, and concentrated. A small flame appeared, dancing in her palm with the same controlled grace Aaron had seen in his mother's memories. "Fire magic comes naturally to me. It's in my blood, passed down from my mother." Aaron watched, fascinated, as the flame grew slightly, its color shifting from orange to a deeper red. Then, as he watched, the flame began to solidify. The edges hardened, the dancing motion slowed, and within seconds, the flame had transformed into a small stone that glowed with inner heat, pulsing like a heartbeat. "Earth magic," Lyra continued, "I had to learn. It doesn't come as naturally, but with practice, I can combine the two." She held the glowing stone up to the firelight, and Aaron could see the way heat radiated from it, distorting the air around it. Fire and earth merged. The stone holds the heat, concentrates it, makes it more controlled and longer lasting than raw flame. That's amazing, Aaron breathed, leaning forward to get a better look. Can you teach me to do that? Eventually, maybe, Lyra said, closing her hand around the stone. When she opened it again, the stone had cooled to ordinary rock, the heat and glow gone. But you need to master your fire magic first. The Emberborn were pure fire mages. They didn't dilute their power by learning other disciplines. That purity is what made them so powerful. You're a fire mage? Aaron asked, still processing what he'd seen. I mean, I knew you had magic, but I didn't realize. My mother was a fire mage, my father an earth mage, Lyra explained. I inherited abilities from both, though the fire magic is stronger. It's not uncommon for mages to have mixed heritage, especially in the smaller guilds. The great guilds, like the Emberborn, they kept their bloodlines pure, believing it made their magic stronger. Did it? Aaron asked. Make them stronger, I mean? Yes, Kale said quietly, speaking for the first time since the confrontation. The Emberborn could create firestorms that lasted for days. They could melt stone with a thought, could turn entire battlefields into seas of flame. That kind of power comes from generations of pure fire magic, concentrated and refined. Aaron felt a chill despite the warmth of the fire. That's terrifying. It's your heritage, Lyra said, her voice gentle but firm. That power is in your blood, Aaron. Once you're trained, once you learn to control it, you'll be capable of things that would make most mages weep with envy or terror. I don't want to melt armies, Aaron said quietly, echoing words he'd spoken before. I just want to understand who I am. You'll have to do both, Lyra replied. Understanding yourself means understanding your power. And your power is going to make you a target for the rest of your life. Valor knows what you're capable of becoming. That's why he's so determined to kill you before you reach your potential. The weight of that settled over Aaron like a heavy cloak. He stared into the fire, watching the flames dance, and thought about his mother's words. Fire is not your enemy. It is part of you. But what if that part of him was too powerful? What if he couldn't control it? What if he became the very thing he feared, a weapon of destruction? Hey, Lyra said, and Aaron looked up to find her watching him with an expression that was almost tender. Don't let it overwhelm you. Yes, you have incredible power. Yes, it's dangerous. But power itself isn't good or evil. It's what you choose to do with it that matters. And from what I've seen, you're not the kind of person who would use it carelessly. How can you know that? Aaron asked. You barely know me. I know you stopped to help that family with the broken wagon, even though it put us at risk, Lyra said. I know you wanted to help the survivors in that burned town, even though staying would have been dangerous. I know you feel guilty about things that aren't your fault. Those aren't the traits of someone who would abuse power. Aaron felt warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the fire. He met Lyra's eyes across the flames and saw something there, understanding, perhaps, or recognition. She'd been through loss too, had felt the weight of responsibility, had struggled with questions about power and purpose. In that moment, he felt a connection to her that went beyond simple companionship. Thank you, he said quietly. For saying that. For being here. Lyra smiled, and it transformed her face, softening the hard edges and making her look younger, more vulnerable. Where else would I be? I've been searching for you for months. I'm not about to leave now that I've found you. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Aaron couldn't quite name. He found himself noticing details he'd missed before, the way the firelight caught in her eyes, making them seem to glow with inner warmth. The curve of her smile, the strength in her features balanced by an unexpected gentleness. She was beautiful, he realized, but it was a beauty tempered by experience and loss, made more profound by the determination that radiated from her. Kale cleared his throat, breaking the moment. We should discuss Stoneheart, he said, his tone businesslike. Lyra is right about the internal politics. We'll need to be careful. Lyra tore her gaze away from Aaron and nodded. Magistrate Kara is the current leader. She's pragmatic, intelligent, and deeply cautious. She won't grant us sanctuary without extracting something in return, information, service, or leverage she can use in her own political games. What kind of leverage? Aaron asked. Having the last Emberborn under her roof would give Stoneheart significant prestige, Lyra explained. It would also make them a target for Valor's forces. Kara will weigh those factors carefully before deciding whether to help us. And if she decides we're not worth the risk, then we'll have to convince her otherwise, Kale said. Or find another guild willing to take us in. But Stoneheart is our best option. They have the resources to train you properly, and their defenses are formidable. If any guild can withstand Valor's assault, it's them. You mentioned factions, Aaron said to Lyra. What are they? Who should I trust? Lyra considered the question, staring into the fire as she organized her thoughts. There are 3 main factions within Stoneheart. The Traditionalists, led by Captain Moores, believe the guilds should remain independent and isolated. They see cooperation with other guilds as weakness and view outsiders with suspicion. They're not openly hostile to Valor, but they're not willing to fight him either. So they'd rather hide and hope he leaves them alone? Aaron asked. Essentially, yes. Then there are the Expansionists, led by Councillor Thane. They believe Stoneheart should be more aggressive, should expand their influence and control over the surrounding territories. Some of them see Valor as a model to emulate rather than an enemy to fight. They support him, not openly, but they admire his methods, his willingness to consolidate power. They're dangerous because they might see you as a tool to be used rather than a person to be protected. And the third faction, the Reformists, led by Magistrate Kara herself. They believe the guilds need to change, to adapt to the new reality Valor has created. They're open to alliances, to cooperation, to new ways of thinking. They're your best hope for genuine support. Aaron absorbed this information, feeling the complexity of the situation settling over him. It wasn't enough to reach Stoneheart. He'd have to navigate political currents he barely understood, convince people who had their own agendas, prove himself worthy of protection while avoiding being used as a pawn. It sounds exhausting, he said. It is, Lyra agreed. But it's necessary. The days of isolated guilds pursuing their own interests are over. Valor has made sure of that. If we're going to stop him, we need allies. And getting allies means playing politics, whether we like it or not. I'm not good at politics, Aaron admitted. I can barely remember my own past. How am I supposed to navigate guild intrigue? You won't be alone, Lyra said, and there was something fierce in her voice. I'll be there. Kale will be there. We'll help you navigate the dangerous waters. You just need to be yourself, honest, compassionate, determined. Those qualities will serve you better than any political cunning. She's right, Kale added. Don't try to be something you're not. The Emberborn were respected not just for their power, but for their integrity. Show them that integrity, and you'll win more allies than any amount of manipulation could gain you. Aaron nodded, trying to take comfort in their words. But the weight of responsibility still pressed down on him. So many people depending on him. So many expectations. So much at stake. What about Master Torvin? He asked, remembering the name Kale had mentioned. You said he might train me. What's he like? Lyra's expression grew complicated, respect mixed with something like sadness. Torvin is difficult. He's one of the greatest warriors Stoneheart has ever produced, a master of combining earth magic with physical combat. But he's also bitter, haunted by losses from the guild wars. He lost people under his command, including his own daughter. He retired from active service years ago and now trains the next generation, but he's harsh, demanding, and doesn't suffer fools. He sounds terrifying. He is, Lyra said with a slight smile. But he's also exactly what you need. If anyone can teach you to survive what's coming, it's Torvin. He won't coddle you, won't make excuses. For you, won't let you give up. He'll push you harder than you've ever been pushed. And if you can meet his standards, you'll emerge stronger than you ever imagined. No pressure, Aaron muttered, and Lyra laughed, a genuine, warm sound that made something in Aaron's chest flutter. You'll do fine, she said. I've seen you fight, seen you push through exhaustion and fear. You have what it takes. You just need to believe in yourself. They fell silent after that, each lost in their own thoughts. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling up into the night sky. Above them, stars were beginning to appear, bright points of light in the deepening darkness. The forest around them was alive with night sounds, crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze, the distant call of a night bird. Aaron found himself watching Lyra again, studying her profile in the firelight. She sat with her knees drawn up, her arms wrapped around them, staring into the flames with an expression of deep thought. There was something about her that drew him, not just her beauty or her strength, but something deeper, a sense of kinship, of shared understanding. They'd both lost everything. They'd both been shaped by tragedy. They'd both chosen to fight rather than surrender to despair. As if sensing his gaze, Lyra turned to look at him. Their eyes met, and, for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. Aaron felt his heart beat faster, felt heat rise to his face that had nothing to do with the fire. He wanted to say something, to express what he was feeling, but the words wouldn't come. Lyra smiled slightly, a knowing look in her eyes, and Aaron realized she understood. She felt it too, this connection, this pull between them. It was too soon to name it, too fragile to examine too closely. But it was there, growing stronger with each shared moment, each conversation, each glance across the fire. "Get some rest," Cale said, breaking the moment. His voice was gentle but firm. "We have a long journey ahead of us tomorrow, and you'll both need your strength." Aaron reluctantly tore his gaze away from Lyra and nodded. He was exhausted. He realized the day's events had drained him emotionally and physically. He lay down by the fire, pulling his blanket around him, and tried to settle into sleep. But sleep was slow to come. His mind kept churning, processing everything that had happened, everything he'd learned. The burnt town and its survivors. Lyra's revelation about Cale's nature. The political complexities waiting for them at Stohart. The power in his blood and the responsibility that came with it. And beneath it all, a new awareness of Lyra lying a few feet away, of the connection growing between them, of the possibility of something more than just companionship. He turned his head slightly and saw that Lyra was still awake, staring up at the stars visible through gaps in the canopy. As if sensing his gaze, she turned to look at him. In the dying firelight, her eyes seemed to glow with warmth. "Can't sleep," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Too much to think about," Aaron whispered back. "I know the feeling." She was quiet for a moment, then added, "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. Glad I found you. I know the road ahead is going to be difficult, but I think we can face it together." Together, Aaron echoed, and the word felt like a promise. Lyra smiled, then closed her eyes. Within minutes, her breathing had deepened into the steady rhythm of sleep. Aaron watched her for a moment longer, then turned his gaze to the stars above. Traveling with 3 people was different from traveling with just Cale. With Cale, there had been a sense of isolation, of being cut off from the world, guided by a mysterious protector who revealed little and demanded trust. But with Lyra here, everything felt more real, more grounded. She asked questions Aaron had been afraid to ask. She challenged Cale in ways Aaron hadn't dared. She made him feel less alone in his confusion and fear. And she made him feel something else too, something warm and hopeful and terrifying all at once. Something that had nothing to do with magic or destiny or ancient bloodlines, and everything to do with the way she smiled at him across the fire, the way she believed in him when he struggled to believe in himself. Across the fire, Cale sat with his back against a tree, keeping watch. His eyes reflected the firelight in that unsettling way, and Aaron wondered again what he truly was, what secrets he carried. But for now, those questions could wait. For now, it was enough to know that Cale was protecting them, that Lyra was beside him, that they were moving forward together toward whatever awaited them at Stoneheart. As Aaron finally drifted off to sleep, his last conscious thought was of Lyra's smile and the warmth it kindled in his chest, a different kind of fire, but no less powerful for being gentle.